Buckle up. We are heading into the final hours of voting and the first results in one of the most consequential midterm elections ever.
It's the high-stakes finish to a fever-pitch campaign.
Are you ready to win this election? I love to win.
Voters making big choices in a nation on edge.
With high prices,
crime is rising.
the constant threat of gun violence,
the woman's right to choose.
What's happening across the U.S. could shake up the balance of power in Congress and shape the next race for the White House.
So speak out, get engaged, vote, vote, vote.
Tonight, Democrats are fighting to hold on to the Senate, knowing a loss of just one seat could cost them the majority.
We need a senator that understands what Pennsylvania's going through, not some guy that has 10 gigantic mansions.
The poster child for the far-left radical part of the Democratic Party, John Fetterman.
Republicans are aiming to win back the House and take back the Speaker's gavel.
We must change direction in Washington.
Everything is at stake.
Both parties hoping to expand their influence by winning governor's offices across the nation.
We will never, ever surrender to the woke agenda.
Governor DeSantis only cares about the White House. He doesn't give a damn about your house.
It's a critical test of the current president's agenda.
We'll get it done because we're already getting it done.
And the former president's grip on the GOP.
Welcome to the new Republican Party.
Will this election set the wheels in motion for a Biden-Trump rematch?
Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans have made their choice, full of anger, violence, hate, and division.
Watching our country go to hell, we may have to do it again.
This is CNN's coverage of Election Night in America. The races for Congress, the contest for governor, and the future of American democracy.
We're taking our state back by storm.
Our democracy is on this ballot.
The people are choosing, the world is watching, and anything is possible until the last vote.
And we are live in Washington on a very suspenseful night in American politics. Voters are deciding control of the United States Congress and the direction of the country over the next 2 years. Welcome to CNN's special coverage of Election Night in America. I'm Jake Tapper. This is the first major election since President Biden took office, and it's the first chance for voters nationwide to weigh in on his record at a moment when so many Americans are struggling with high inflation and economic anxiety. Republicans believe that will work to their advantage as they fight to win the 218 House seats they need to reclaim the majority. That's 5 more seats than they have now. The battle will take place in 82 key House races, competitive contests that could go either way. In the closely divided Senate, Republicans need 51 seats to take back control. That's only 1 more seat than they have now. We're watching 13 key races that will be crucial to the fight for the Senate. Another factor in this election, former President Donald Trump, who has endorsed a slew of Republicans who support his false claims about the 2020 election. Some of them could have influence over certifying the results in 2024 or refusing to do so if they win tonight. That includes some of the candidates for governor and races playing out in 36 states across the nation, among them the pivotal battlegrounds of Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, and Florida. Covering all of this tonight, Dana Bash, Abby Phillip, Chris Wallace, and our entire election team. John King is over at the Magic Wall. He'll help us make sense of the results by mapping out the races district by district. As we await the first votes, Casey Hunt is standing by. She's following all 35 Senate contests, including the crucial key races. Boris Sanchez will be reporting results from those 36 governors contests across the U.S. David Chalian's here, too. He's getting ready to roll out the first exit polls on what voters are thinking. And Brianna Keeler's at our voting desk, keeping tabs on how the ballots are being counted in each state and any issues at polling places. We also have correspondents spread out across the country at candidates' headquarters and at vote counting centers. They're also right here in Washington, D.C. First, let's go to Manu Raju. He's at the headquarters of House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy. Manu, how confident is McCarthy feeling right now?
Extremely confident, Jake. In fact, for the last couple of weeks, I'm told Kevin McCarthy has been working on a victory speech that he plans to deliver tonight. They believe that they will take the majority potentially as soon as 11 p.m. Eastern time. That is what they are looking at the time where they believe that McCarthy may come out and deliver some remarks. Have been prepared, some off-the-cuff remarks as well. We do expect to hear from some other Republican officials through the course of the night. Ronna McDaniel, the RNC chairwoman, is one who could talk, as well as Newt Gingrich, the former House Speaker. Now, McCarthy's been raising an enormous sums of money. He has traveled, in fact, to 40 states over the last several weeks, and including today in Virginia, 2 districts in which they believe could help them take back the majority. But McCarthy and his team, I'm told, Jake, have set the bar at 20 seats. That is more than enough to take back the majority, but they believe if they clear that bar, it will be a very successful night because they believe that will give them enough for what they consider a governing majority. Anything less than 20 seats, they believe, while successful to take back the majority, would make Kevin McCarthy's life more difficult, assuming he gets the Speaker's gavel. So while winning the majority is critical, Republicans and Democrats both looking at the margins, also significant in tonight's results.
All right, Manu, thanks so much. Now let's go to one of the most important battlegrounds tonight, Pennsylvania. Jessica Dean's in Pittsburgh at the headquarters of Democratic Senate candidate and current Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. Jessica, the battle for control of the Senate could hinge on this race. What is the thinking right now in the Fetterman campaign headquarters?
Yeah, it certainly could, Jake. And across the country, Democrats are playing a lot of defense. But here is the rare chance where they could play a little offense. It's an open Senate seat. A Republican, Pat Toomey, is retiring, and Democrats would certainly love to pick this up. And I talked to several campaign sources late this afternoon, and one of them acknowledging, look, this is a jump ball. We know this is an incredibly tight race, but what they are confident in is that they closed it out as strongly as they possibly could. The campaign really feels like the last 5 days in particular have been very, very good for them. They highlight the Oprah Winfrey endorsement that came late Thursday and then dominated the local news cycle here in Pennsylvania on Friday. Then they had the rally with former President Obama and President Biden here in Philadelphia, and then one here in Pittsburgh with Obama. And they really feel like that has really lifted and given them a lot of momentum heading into today, especially with suburban women. That was a demographic that came up again and again when I was talking to them. One more thing that the campaign is pretty confident about, Jake, is that they believe that Mehmet Oz, the Republican challenger here, who's really pitched himself as an independent voice, as a moderate, undercut that message by appearing at the rally with President Trump over the weekend. Doug Mastriano, the Republican gubernatorial candidate, also there as well. Jake.
All right, Jessica Dean in Pittsburgh, thanks so much. All 435 House seats are being decided in this election, but only the most competitive races will ultimately determine which party wins control. House Republicans must win 30 of those competitive seats to reclaim the majority. House Democrats must win 53 of those competitive seats. So Democrats face a much more difficult challenge. They have fewer seats in the safe column. We're going to see if they can meet that challenge as the results come in. And let's make our first trip right now to John King at the Magic Wall to take a look at the balance of power and the state of play here when it comes to the House of Representatives. John.
Brand new map, Jake, because the 2020 census begets redistricting, which gets you the 2020 map. But just focus on this map to begin with. This is the current House. This is the prior map. So the district lines have been changed quite a bit. But that's the math you need to remember. Republicans essentially need a net gain of only 5. The historical average is 30 if you go back to Ronald Reagan's days.
30, for midterm election.
President's first midterm election. 37 if you start the clock at Bill Clinton, when most people think our polarized politics started to begin. So you're looking at this map across the country. You mentioned those competitive races. First, let's bring them up this way and just lay them out, just to show they are coast to coast, right? You have competitive House districts from coast to coast. But here's another way to look at it, the way you just brought it up. And we get into how this map tells you here, look at all that blue. That tells you Democrats are on defense, defending way more districts. Look at the guide down here. 57 of these districts have incumbent Democrats. 20 of them, only 20, have incumbent Republicans. You have 4 new districts, no incumbent, recently redrawn, and a race down here in Texas with 2 incumbents. But think about that. Democrats are defending nearly 3 times as many seats in a Democratic president's first midterm year. They go from the northeast corner of Maine all the way down to Southern California. Ranked choice voting in Maine and Alaska, we may not know the results of those seats for quite some time, but just think about Republicans need a net gain of 5. Jake, it's possible. They could get it right here. Manu was talking about the Republican optimism tonight, that maybe by 11 o'clock tonight they will know. Well, there are so many places we will get results early on and we can watch it. Let me close this off. Let me get rid of the line so you can see it. Again, in the Commonwealth, in the state of New Hampshire, excuse me, 2 competitive House districts there, also a very competitive Senate race. So we could learn early on right here in New Hampshire. Can these 2 Democrats, these are white working class districts, can they hang on? Can they be competitive? We'll get early clues there. Then you drop down from there. Just in the state of New York, we have 10 competitive districts in the state of New York. 7 of them are Democrats on defense right there. And if you come down to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, 17 districts across the Commonwealth, but you see 4 districts in blue right here again. The 4 competitive districts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which has a governor's race and a Senate race as well, all Democrats. So, Jake, we could get early clues as you come down. And then, if we haven't figured it out by then, the Commonwealth of Virginia also. An upscale Democratic suburban district here just across the bridge in the Washington, D.C. suburbs. Another suburban district down here, big change in the demographics of this district as well. Can Jennifer Wexton hold on? Can Elaine Luria hold on down there? So we have a number of examples, even though it could take us quite some time to get to the final House math. These races in the East are going to tell us quite a bit, and they stretch down. Again, you can start in the East Coast, go across the Midwest, all the way here, that the Democrats are on defense so much out here. The Democrats have dominated the West Coast for a generation. Look, competitive seats in Washington, in Oregon, a number in California as well. Democrats on defense, Jake, their challenge tonight, upend history.
Yeah, it's exciting, John King. We don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of fun because it so rarely happens. Dana Bash, as we prepare for the evening, what are you looking for?
I'll pick up where John left off, which is in Virginia, because particularly it's Virginia's 2nd congressional district. Elaine Luria, who is an incumbent Democrat, people have gotten to know her because she was and is a member of the January 6th committee. She is in a district that has flipped back and forth over the past 20 years. And she was also a so-called majority maker in 2018. She was part of the wave of Democrats who helped pick up the House for them. She has spent about $11 million in a small congressional district in a race. And she's been working as hard as she possibly can up against a very, very sour mood. We will know early on because polls close at 7 o'clock, and they tend to tabulate them pretty fast in Virginia, whether or not she is going to survive, and that could be, actually will likely be a telltale for other like-minded districts around the country.
Dana, I will see your Virginia 2 and raise you New York 17. That's a congressional district in the Hudson Valley, just north of New York. It's an area that Biden won 2 years ago by 10 points. What's especially interesting about it, Jake, is that Sean Patrick Maloney, the chairman of the House Democratic Campaign Committee, the DCCC, is running there, and Republicans have gone in heavy. They've spent millions of dollars. It was still thought Maloney is going to win, but it got sufficiently tight that in the final weeks, that Maloney's committee, the DCCC, put $600,000 into Maloney's race rather than some of the other races. A lot of the other Democrats not happy about that. If Maloney should lose, it'll be the first time that one House party has taken out the other House party's campaign chairman since 1980.
You know what I think is so interesting about tonight? This is one of the rare times when both parties are like, I don't know what's going to happen with the Senate. And that kind of uncertainty, I think, is partly about what I consider tonight to be this split screen moment. The top of the ticket in the governor's race and then the Senate race in a lot of these states are not rowing in the same direction. So when you look at a state like Georgia, for example, if you have Brian Kemp running well ahead of Stacey Abrams, what does that do to a very tight Senate contest? You could tell the same story in Arizona, in Pennsylvania, in Nevada. Lots of the key Senate races tonight, there's something totally different happening at the top of the ticket, and I think that's going to be something both parties are looking at.
Yeah, I mean, so speaking of that, I mean, one of the places I'm watching really closely is Pennsylvania for exactly that reason, because we are more than likely, Democrats feel very confident about their gubernatorial candidate in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, over the Republican Doug Mastriano. But the Senate race really could go very, very differently. And, you know, I've been talking to sources throughout the afternoon, and there's a couple things to watch. This is going to be one of the critical Senate races. We're going to start to get the vote count in early, but we expect it to take potentially days to actually count. That's partly because of Philadelphia County, but both my Democratic and Republican sources are really watching for turnout in Philadelphia, and they're also looking for margin in the Philadelphia suburbs, which, Jake, I know you know very well, as do I, having grown up there, because they're really looking for particularly white suburban women and how they're voting to try to see how the night's going.
And that's going to be, that demographic is going to be one of the key questions all night long in Philadelphia or in the Philadelphia collar counties. in Virginia's 2nd District that I was talking about all over. They went towards Joe Biden and the Democrats last time around. The question is whether Republicans can get them back.
Fascinating stuff coming up as we stand by for the first exit polls on what is on the mind of the voters. We're going to break down the newest numbers on early voting in key battleground states. We're finding some surprises. Stay with us on this election night in America. Welcome back. Congress, control of Congress, it's up for grabs as we head into the final hours of voting across the country in this momentous midterm election. We're back in the CNN Election Center. Right now, we have a new breakdown of early voting in key battleground states, and we're finding some interesting twists. Brianna Keeler is at our voting desk with that. Brianna.
Jake, more than 45 million ballots were cast before Election Day in 47 states. And here's what we know about where those early votes are coming from. You can see here on the map the states that have cast the most early votes. Texas has the highest count with more than 5.4 million votes. Next is Florida with more than 4.9, 4.7 in California, 2.5 in Georgia, and 2.1 million in North Carolina. So these are all the states with more than 2 million ballots cast. And here's what we can tell you about who is voting. In Pennsylvania, we see a pretty typical divide between the parties when it comes to pre-election day ballots. 69% of votes so far from registered Democrats, 21% from Republicans. And that is roughly the same breakdown that we saw in Pennsylvania in 2020, with 66% of early votes from Democrats and 23% from Republicans. But then take a look at this. There are several states seeing a rise in early voting from Republicans. In Ohio, Republicans make up 28% of early votes. That is up 5% from 2020, as you see here. And in Florida, Republicans are outpacing Democrats, making up 43% of early votes. That is also up 5% from 2020. So we're going to see what kind of impact these pre-election votes will have as results start coming in tonight, Jake.
All right, Brianna, now let's go live to our battleground correspondent. Sarah Seidner is at a voting location in Tempe, Arizona. Sarah, what kind of turnout are you seeing there?
It has tripled in the past couple of hours. The line here on ASU campus. We're in Tempe, Arizona. That is part of Maricopa County, the largest and most populous county in Arizona. What we do know is that typically about 85% of voters vote early. So this line is indication that there are quite a few people left that want to get their vote in today. There are a lot of folks here who are students. There are a lot of folks here who are first-time voters. And, you know, we are talking to them about some of the different issues that they have come here to vote about. There are lots of concerns about a lot of different things. So, you know, and you have people here that are constantly, you know, saying you've got to be 75 feet. You've got people who are constantly making sure that people feel safe. But, you know, we've got different voters from different parts of the state, because, or of the county, because you can go anywhere. Okay, so apparently we're a little close. So we've been doing this all day long, talking to different people. I apologize for that. We got a little bit too close, but you can see they're serious about making sure that people feel safe here as they vote, Jake.
All right, Sarah Seidner, let's go now to Nevada. Gary Tuckman is at a voting site in Las Vegas. Gary, how busy is it where you are?
Jake, we picked a busy place, not only because of the intense interest in 3 major races here in Nevada, but we are in a mall just east of the Las Vegas Strip in Clark County. So you can come here, you can shop, you can eat, you can ride kiddie rides, you can go to the movie theater, and you can cast ballots. And that's what lots of people are doing here. Just about 5 minutes ago, when I walked down that line, you see there were more than 100 people waiting to vote in the 25 stations here. And the people are talking to us about 5 major issues when we just talked to them. No particular order: the economy, crime, reproductive rights, the border, and Trump, both pro and anti-Trump. Now, is this precinct busier than normal? Is it less busy than normal? There's no way to know in Nevada by the individual precincts, because unlike most states, you can go to any voting center in the county you live in. There are 17 counties in Nevada, Clark County being the most populated. More than 70% of the population lives here, but they make it very convenient to vote, and also to vote early. Even before the polling places open today, 34% of the registered voters in the state of Nevada already have had their ballots received by early in-person voting, which lasted 2 weeks, and mail-in voting. In this state, if you register to vote, you automatically receive a mail-in ballot. Those ballots have to be received by this Saturday if they're postmarked by today. The polls are open for another 4 hours here in the state of Nevada.
All right,
Jay,
Gary
back to
Tuchman,
you.
thank you so much. Appreciate it. And we should point out two of the big battleground states here when it comes to control of the Senate are in the states we just went to, Nevada and Arizona.
Right, 35 Senate elections in all. We have identified, again, through our friends at Inside Elections as well, we view 8 most competitive seats. There are others that could come into play. You get surprised sometimes in a midterm election. The 8 most competitive seats, though, are evenly divided right now in terms of the 4 are held by Republicans, 4 are held by Democrats. But 6 of these 8 states were carried by Joe Biden 2 years ago. So again, Democrats won these states just 2 years ago statewide.
Narrowly in 3 of them.
Some of them quite narrowly. You're absolutely right. So you look at the terrain here, and again, it stretches from New Hampshire over to Nevada and Arizona. But the best way to look at this, especially early on as we wait, we talked a few minutes ago, Jake, about how the Democrats have such little room for error when it comes to the House, only a 5-seat pad, if you will. They have no room. Absolutely no room for error. In a Democratic president's first midterm, with those headwinds of inflation in your face, the historical average, again, back to Reagan, is you lose 2. So Democrats could have a good night by historical standards and only lose 1. That would give Republicans the Senate.
That's all they need.
Yeah, that's why this is so fascinating. So think about the chess throughout the night, right? Republicans suddenly, of late in this campaign, think we have a chance in New Hampshire, right? So let's bring it down to this map here, right? So if this is hypothetical early on, but if Don Bolduc were to pick up New Hampshire, then Democrats are down to 49. Then what do they have to do to keep the majority? They have to pick up a piece, right? If you lose a piece, you have to pick up a piece. This is their best hope, the very competitive Pennsylvania Senate race, your home state. This, like New Hampshire, will be decided in the suburbs. Let's hypothetically say that the Democrats can get that. Okay, then they're back to 50-50. But then you go through these competitive races in Georgia, in Arizona, in Nevada. Republicans say keep an eye on Colorado and Washington State tonight. The Democratic hope, Jake, is for some kind of a surprise in a state, carried by Trump, North Carolina, carried by Trump, Ohio, carried by Biden, Wisconsin. Democrats are hoping that they have an upset up their sleeve. It would be remarkable if they do, but very close races, all 3 of those. So what's going to happen as we count the votes tonight is to just follow the chess, right? So let's go back to where we are so people aren't confused. You come back to where we are at 50-50. Here's how we rank them heading into the election night, right? Toss up Pennsylvania, toss up Georgia, toss up Nevada, lean Republican in Wisconsin, Ohio, and North Carolina. And then again, you have these states out west. If the most vulnerable Democrat is where Gary Tuchman is, right? The Democrats are very worried about this one. And again, if Republicans take one away, Adam Loxelt is the candidate there, Democrats are down in this scenario down to 48. And so that's because the toss-ups are taken away.
And can I just say one thing about Nevada? I believe this is the first election statewide in Nevada in decades that Harry Reid, the former Senate Majority Leader, is not alive. And he had that state. It was a well-oiled machine. He had close ties to the unions. He was able to eke out victories, narrow ones, but every time he's not there anymore.
It's an excellent point because that's one of the that has been up to this point one of the exceptions to the rules in the sense that the national political parties and even state political parties, their influence has deteriorated, largely going back to the Citizens United campaign finance decision. If you can flood a ton of money in, from anywhere, the state parties or the national parties are diminished. But you're right, Harry Reid managed to keep that network together. And that's what a lot of Democrats are worried about. Do you have a good early vote operation? Do you have a good turnout operation on Election Day? Are you keeping close track of everybody? That will be one of the tests of all these places. Now, Democrats promised to surprise us out there. I colored that red just in this hypothetical. I want to come back here, just keep coming back.
It's a toss-up.
Yeah, to where we are. It's a toss-up. Democrats say they're going to surprise us. They say, remember, Donald Trump made inroads among Latino voters.
Right.
Right? That could matter in the Senate race here. It could matter in the Senate race here. It could matter in Senate races everywhere. Even
Colorado, too.
Colorado as well, in the Denver suburbs. Even in places where the Latino population is 6% or 12% or 15%, a swing constituency can matter quite a bit. Democrats say they're going to surprise us, and they learned the lesson of 2020. That's why we count votes. But the challenging part about this map is that the president has absolutely no room for error. So if you see one of the blues turn red, then you look at the map all night. Okay, which one of the reds can turn blue? We're going to be watching this play out across the country. Republicans are very confident they will get at least one. Some Republicans are looking for 2 or 3. But these will all come down. Suburbs in Pennsylvania, suburbs in Georgia, outside Atlanta, Maricopa County, Clark County. This election will be decided like all close ones in the suburbs.
Yeah. And it is nerve-wracking. It's exciting. We're getting closer to the first exit polls on the issues driving voters. What's on your mind? But first, we're going to take a look at the Biden and the Trump factors in this election. Which one of them will have a bigger impact on the outcome? We'll talk about that when we're back in a moment.
Live pictures of the U.S. Capitol in this tense midterm election night with control of Congress on the line. I'm Anderson Cooper, along with our political team. We'll be tracking the votes as they come in for as long as it takes. Let's go back to Brianna Keeler at the voting desk. A lot could hinge, obviously, on key battlegrounds out west.
Yeah, that's right, Anderson. Let's take a look at two key western states, Arizona and Nevada, and why we might not get final tallies there for days. In Arizona, polls close at 9 p.m. Eastern, but no results will be released until 10 p.m., an hour later. And we could see results from Maricopa County even later. So what's been going on in Maricopa County? Earlier today, Arizona officials said tabulating machines at about 20% of their 223 voting locations were rejecting ballots as voting got underway. File this under technical difficulties, but we just learned from election officials that this problem has been resolved and all of those votes will, of course, be counted. State officials are expecting the majority of ballot processing will be done by this weekend, meaning if there are some tight races in Arizona, we may not actually have final results for a few days here. Then in Nevada, this is the first midterm election with universal mail-in voting. It's a method that was first put in place due to COVID in 2020. It means that everyone in the state is sent a ballot in the mail. To be clear here, everyone receives one. They don't have to use it. Voters can still go to the polls in person today. We don't have too many details from election officials about what order ballots will be reported tonight, which means it could take longer to project the winners. And even though election workers started processing and counting mail ballots on October 24th, Nevada will continue to accept mail ballots that are postmarked on or before today through November 12th. Anderson.
All right. Thanks very much. Former President Trump will be among those watching the returns from Arizona and Nevada very closely, two of the states where he challenged his 2020 election laws. Kristen Holmes is at Trump's home base at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida. So what are you hearing from inside the Trump camp tonight about his focus?
Well, it might be 2022, but the focus is largely on 2024 and that third presidential run, which we are expecting Trump to make an announcement on just a week from today. What they are looking at is how many seats the House picks up, which of Trump's endorsed candidates, both in the Senate as well as gubernatorial, actually pick up their seats as well. How big is a red wave that can give him the momentum he needs going into that expected announcement next week? They are also particularly watching which races they believe Trump will be given credit for. That is the Senate races in Arizona, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. That is, of course, if Republicans do take those seats. Now, there is one other race that they're watching very closely, and that is the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. A big victory for DeSantis could give DeSantis the momentum he needs with allies and donors following this election. I talked to one source who said that they believe that they've encouraged Trump to actually announce earlier than later because of this. As we know, DeSantis is considered the most formidable opponent to Donald Trump should they both run in 2024. And I got to say, in this interview that I just listened to, Trump essentially says that DeSantis, he has no idea if he's running, but there's no tiff. But then he follows that up by saying that if he does run, he might reveal some details he knows about him. So clearly there seems like a veiled threat on the eve of the election.
Yeah, not even so veiled, really. Really, pretty much ripped that veil right off. Thanks so much here with the team in New York. I mean, it is interesting, Gloria, to see what candidates have wanted to be close with Joe Biden on the Democratic side and what candidates have, wanted to be seen with Trump and which ones did it.
Well,
Mehmet Oz was at a rally with Trump, but did not mention Trump's name once.
And you kind of wonder why, I guess they couldn't avoid it, but you kind of wonder why Trump was even there, since Mehmet Oz has been trying to move to the center and virtually erased Trump from his campaign. But if Trump says, I'm coming, there's really nothing you can do about it. But Biden, for example, hasn't been in Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. These are very tight races. They don't think he's going to help them much over there. But whatever happens, and thanks to Scott Jennings for this, we know that Donald Trump is going to take credit for any victories, because here's what he just told News Nation, was it? If I win, if they win, meaning his candidates that he's endorsed, I should get all the credit. If they lose, I should not be blamed at all. But it'll probably be just the opposite.
Sort of.
There
Great
you
philosophy
go.
if you can do it.
I raised my kids to think about
the
life
difference
exactly that way.
The difference between the Biden situation and the Trump situation is he honestly can take credit for those candidates being the nominees in those states. Mehmet Oz wouldn't be the nominee but for Donald Trump. Masters in Arizona, Herschel Walker, he sort of orchestrated that. J.D. Vance in Ohio. So he is responsible for those candidates.
Except if they lose.
Right. Well, but if he's going to get responsibility for them, I'm sure Dave and others will make sure he does. If
Blame
Republicans,
or credit, David.
if Republicans lose that, in Biden's case, it is very much. I mean, I went through this in 2010 when I was working for President Obama. The president becomes the fulcrum of the attack against the governing party. And so candidates often don't want them, particularly in these swing states. Biden's numbers in these swing states and swing districts are actually lower than his national numbers, which aren't that high. And so it's not advantageous for candidates to be with him.
But Biden was quite welcome in Pennsylvania, which is a swing state, and he was there with Obama. Look, I think that we had hoped that you could kind of throw Trump to the wolves and be done with him. He's come back leading the pack. And that's going to be a problem going forward. But I think tonight what I'm excited about is that people on the ground are still fighting. Polls have been wrong. Guys, everybody, polls have been wrong. Polls were wrong in 2016. Polls were wrong in 2018. And I think you guys might see some surprises tonight when you think about in Wisconsin. Mandela Barnes, they're closed and strong. They're fighting back. They're coming. They're on. You might even have a surprise in North Carolina. I think we've got to take a step back and let the voters do their thing tonight. It's not about Donald Trump. It's not about Biden. It's about the voters.
Listen, I agree. I think Van's overly optimistic, right? I'm here to help you tonight when you're falling down. There's going to be a lot of post-mortem work done tomorrow, this next coming days, about Trump, about Biden, right? I think it's interesting to see how much the former president spent on some of these candidates, right? He has $120 million in the bank. How much did he spend in Pennsylvania? I know, in some of these races, he could have thrown in cash. He didn't choose to throw in cash. If they lose, are people going to, point to him and say, you're sitting on $120 million. You didn't spend any money to help support Mehmet Oz or J.D. Vance or any of these candidates. So I think that's going to be important to look at.
Compared to what?
Well, compared to Scott's former boss,
yeah.
Mitch McConnell raised and spent close to $300 million for candidates. Kevin McCarthy, the same, right? Raising money and really putting effort into it. So I think if you're going to, ascribe credit, if there's a big win tonight for Republicans, I think McCarthy, I think Scott at the NRSC, and I think Kevin McCarthy and Tom Emmers, the NRCC, should
But
get
I
all
think
the
what's
lower.
remarkable to Axelrod's point is I expect Republicans to do well tonight. I think the Senate, there's many paths of Republicans taking back the majority, but that is actually with the worst candidates than what we would have liked to have seen recruited.
And that's because of Donald Trump.
Because of Donald Trump. Doug Ducey not getting into the Senate race, Kristen Nunu not getting into the New Hampshire Senate race, having some of these more vulnerable ones like Blake Masters in Arizona, Mehmet Oz instead of Dave McCormick, I still anticipate will do well, but you kind of have to even take a step back and realize Republicans could have been in an even stronger place if not for Donald Trump.
Well, as Mitch McConnell says, candidate quality was not the greatest, but if it turns out to be a wave, then it's a wave.
I think this candidate quality narrative, it's been viewed through the lens of did the Republicans get the best candidates? And obviously some of these candidates have had challenges, but nobody has stopped to ask themselves, were the Democratic candidates in these races the best candidates? Some of these Democratic incumbents extremely weak. I mean, out in Washington State, we're basically in a dead heat race according to the polls at the last minute here. Tiffany Smollett was a great contrast out there against Murray. Cortez Masto, not all that compelling. Hassan was not all that compelling. I mean, Fetterman. I mean, let's be honest. A lot of challenge. And so everybody's been focused on everybody's been focused on the Republicans. Yeah. The Democrats have had their own, and no one wants to talk about it.
Because some of our candidates may not be the most exciting people in the world, but they aren't crazy people. I think what the challenge that you have right now, if you're just going to be honest, is the Democrats' big problem is we have what appear to be some out-of-touch elites. That's what the knock is on us. But on the other side, it's like out-of-their-mind populists who are literally scaring people, not believing in the election, not believing in the Constitution, and that is the difference. And so I think that when McConnell, who is certainly no squish, says that you got candidate quality problems, you do. You really do.
When you talk about crazy, let's make sure you put an asterisk next to John Fetterman. Just remember
that. Come on. John Fetterman is a beloved respected Democrat. He's done well. And the only reason you guys have a shot at him is because he has a health issue.
No, the only reason he has a shot at him
Awesome.
is because of his policies. He's against fracking, which is hugely important in Pennsylvania. He voted against, listen, he voted against the guy who's going to be the governor, was the attorney general in Pennsylvania, 200 times plus to free people.
I can't wait for the polls to close so you stop campaigning in this.
And you can't say one good thing. You can't say one good thing about Oz, though. That's why you have to attack Fetterman. Look, here's the reality.
Are you going to filibuster?
Well, I think
there is a bit of a recruitment problem on the Dems. I mean, Ron Johnson was the most vulnerable Republican, and Mandela Barnes is not the person, the strongest candidate. Progressive.
Here's the deal. That may well be true. Wait till tonight. He is closing strong.
North Carolina as well.
Ted
Budd
strong.
was not supposed to be a strong
Beasley, I think, is an extraordinary candidate. I think of the Democratic
Party.
Why
didn't the Democrats support her? Why didn't Obama go there?
I do not know, but I tell you what, Beasley could be the sleeper tonight. She's African American. She's an unbelievable candidate. She didn't get support from the party. But look, I will stand with our candidates from here to eternity. You can't stand with some of the people in your own party, and you know it.
The elephant in the room is Joe Biden's lack of popularity here. Yeah. You know, these candidates, you may say they're bad, whatever. It's hard to overcome a president with popularity in the low 40s. That's just it. So you're pushing the ball up the hill the entire time. You may have great candidates, but you're not going to be swept in.
There is going to be a debate within the Democratic Party if Wisconsin goes down, if Pennsylvania goes down, about whether a more center-left candidate could have done better than the candidates who were promoted by the progressive wing of the party.
This point you made is you can analyze these races a lot of different ways, and it's all sort of gut feel on candidate quality. But the fundamentals of elections really don't change. If the president's in the low 40s, if the right track, wrong track is 30 to 70, if 2/3 of the country thinks we're in a recession, if inflation is raging, the gravity of that means a lot more than our gut feelings about these campaigns.
We'll soon get the first clues about how this night may unfold when we roll out our exit polls. Next, we'll zero in on top battlegrounds that will decide control of the Senate, including the key race in Georgia. All ahead. Stay with us.
It is election night in America, and control of the United States Congress is one of the top prizes tonight. Welcome back. We're keeping tabs on voter turnout across the United States, especially, of course, in the key battlegrounds that will decide which party wins the Senate. Brianna Keeler's at our voting desk looking at two of those critical states and how their early votes will be counted. Brianna.
Jake, let's take a closer look at Pennsylvania and Georgia, two states that voted for Trump in 2016 and then flipped to Biden in 2020. In Pennsylvania, the early vote ballot processing couldn't start until today, but there's less than half the amount of mail ballots to count as there was 2 years ago. So that, along with marathon counting, meaning no stopping until the counting is done, should help get results in sooner. But in Philadelphia, officials have reinstated a process just this morning called poll book reconciliation, comparing mail ballots with poll books from Election Day to ensure people have not voted twice. Just to be totally clear, election officials have not encountered any double votes in the county over the last 3 elections, so they're doing this really to prevent claims of voter fraud from Republicans. And it is something that could slow down reporting of results there, but keep in mind there are fewer mail ballots than there were in 2020. So let's go now to Georgia, where they are seeing record early turnout for a midterm election. More than 2.5 million votes already cast. That is a 500,000 more than the 2 million plus in the 2018 midterms. Tonight, Georgia might be one of those states where the Republicans take an early lead, but then as the night goes on, that lead could narrow or flip in favor of Democrats. That is what we saw in 2020, but there are fewer mail ballots than 2 years ago, so that count could be faster tonight, Jake.
All right, Brianna, thanks so much. I'm back here at the Magic Wall with John King. And John, one of the things that our viewers need to keep an eye out for is that sometimes, because every state counts their early votes differently, it might seem as though somebody is taking a lead in a state when it's really just the early votes were counted or not counted, and that creates an illusion that that person is in the lead. And it could be favoring Democrats or it could be favoring Republicans, depending on the state.
And we lived through this on Election Night 2020, which is why we will urge everybody. We're going to be very cautious tonight. We're going to explain things as closely and as carefully as we can. And we're going to urge you to be patient because, to your point, let's go back in time and let's look at the 2020 presidential election. And you bring it up here. This is the end result. And I know there are conspiracies out there. There's no dispute about this because these votes were counted fairly and over time. It took until Saturday and beyond after the election day to get it done. But let's go back in time and remind people what happened. This is 9 o'clock on election night 2020. At this point, you have Joe Biden leading in Florida. I'm sorry, Donald Trump leading in Florida, Donald Trump leading in Michigan, Joe Biden leading in Texas, Joe Biden leading in Ohio, right? So that's...
And North Carolina.
And North Carolina. We'll get more as we go through. So let's play this out as we go through. Now we're going to move forward till midnight, right? So Trump is now Florida, but let's come off the map and look again. What do you still have? You still have Donald Trump leading in Pennsylvania and in Georgia and in Nevada and in Wisconsin and in Michigan, right? And he holds Utah in the end. But so you see, you watch this play out here, right? So then again, so what's happening here? These states are counting their election day ballots first and faster. Election day voting tends to favor Republicans. So you just need to wait it out. Then you move forward. This is noon the next day. What has happened? Donald Trump's still leading in Pennsylvania and still leading in Georgia. Biden has taken Michigan, taken the lead in Wisconsin, and out here in Nevada and Arizona. This is 12 noon, the day after the election. So then you move forward to Friday, right? A full 2 days later. What has happened? They've just been counting votes. Nothing nefarious happened. Joe Biden went ahead in Pennsylvania and in Georgia, and then, of course, you come out. The election. This is when we called the election, Saturday morning at 11:25 a.m., and this is where it ended up when they finished the count, right? So look at this. Look at the difference, though, right? You see the vote count there, and even then, even after we called the election, it takes days to count them out. Make that turn off. There we go. They count even more votes. It just takes time. Nothing nefarious happened. And so you can look at it from the sense of Pennsylvania on Election Day 2020, and again, come back in time.
Because they were still counting, I know Pennsylvania pretty well, right. They were still counting in Philadelphia, the most populous county in the entire Commonwealth, and they were counting and counting and counting. They weren't inventing votes. No. They were counting legal, lawful votes, and it took a long time.
And to the point, Brianna just made an important point. There were more mail-in ballots then because of the COVID pandemic. There are fewer this year. That doesn't mean it won't take a long time to count. And they were counting everywhere. There were just more to count in Philadelphia because it's the most populous part of the thing. But again, if you just look, this is election night, 9 o'clock, right? Joe Biden's ahead. So then you come forward a little bit more. Wow, midnight, right? This is midnight as we move into Wednesday. Donald Trump is ahead. Then you come the next day, noon. Donald Trump is ahead, and this is when he starts saying, even before this, stop the count.
Stop the count.
Stop the count. We're done.
Well, he said he lied and said people were still voting.
Right.
Nobody was voting. They were counting.
They were counting. They were counting ballots that had been cast and received with Republican and Democratic election observers watching it all play out, as happens all the time, which is what you want. And so, but look, even at noon on Friday, November 6th, right? This is when Joe Biden goes ahead for the first time, and then you see that's by 9,000 votes there. And then by Saturday morning, when we called it, it grew to 28,000 votes. And by the time they were done counting in Pennsylvania, it got to 81,000.
So let's go back to 9 p.m. in Pennsylvania, okay? Because we're going to have a 9 p.m. in Pennsylvania here, too. 9 p.m. Pennsylvania, this was what it was?
This is what it was. Biden's ahead at 9 o'clock. The first results that came in. But it was a little bit later when you had Bannon.
Okay.
By midnight.
So this is midnight. And it is entirely possible, again, that at midnight tonight, the result in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania will suggest that the Republican is in the lead for the Senate and the Republican is in the lead for the governor's office.
There are also 4 competitive House races there, 2 over here and 2 over here. It is possible. It is quite possible.
But the votes will not have all been counted.
No, and we will know that, and we will report that as transparently as we get the information from the state officials. We will be able to show you the outstanding vote throughout the night. And we're making an example here of a state that started out with the red mirage, if you will.
Let's go back. Can you do Ohio? Do Ohio.
Look like, sure, we can do Ohio. We come out. Let's come all the way out. Let me go back to the beginning here. And if you bring up Ohio on
election night, Ohio, Joe Biden was up by 10 percentage points at 9 p.m. Ultimately, we knew, and we had been telling people, do not think that the early results in Ohio are going to be the final results, indicative of the final results, because we know there are a lot of early votes, and they're disproportionately for Democrats.
They're allowed to count the mail-in ballots here. Some states are allowed to process those, clear them, make sure they're legal.
Texas and Ohio.
Right, and they do the count quickly. So we were getting texts on election night 2020, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. Wow, Joe Biden's going to win Ohio and Texas. And you're kind of responding to people. A lot of votes to count.
So again, because there are competitive races in Ohio tonight, where there might be a blue mirage in Ohio tonight.
You could see 9 to 10 o'clock tonight. Your Democrats are leading somewhere, and we're going to be here, just as we're going to do in the states where the Republicans are leading, saying just these are votes. They're votes. They're fair, freely, perfectly counted votes, but it's not contextual. We don't have the full picture yet, which is what happens over time as you count the votes and you get to the end. And, the same thing that Donald Trump complains about in Pennsylvania happened in Ohio. He won in Ohio. He lost in Pennsylvania because of what? Math.
Right. But oddly, he didn't have any issue with it in Ohio and Texas, and Joe Biden did not claim that he had been cheated out of Ohio and Texas. Right. Because one of them acknowledges the math and one of them does not. We're now just minutes away from unveiling our first exit polls with insights into what is on your mind, the minds of voters as you cast your ballots. That is coming up next on this election night in America. Right now, a heated midterm battle for Congress is underway across the United States. Democrats and Republicans competing for the power to control the agenda in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. I'm Jake Tapper in the CNN Election Center, and we're counting down to the first votes on this election night in America. And our first exit poll results are coming in right now. We're just moments away from bringing you crucial early clues about how this night might play out. President Biden has acknowledged that he and the Democrats are fighting against the tide since the party in power traditionally loses seats in the midterms. Republicans need to win 218 seats to reclaim the majority in the House, 5 more seats than they have now. It's likely to all come down to 82 key House races, competitive contests that could go either way. In the closely divided Senate, Republicans need 51 seats to take back control. That's only 1 more seat than they have now. 13 key Senate races will be crucial in deciding which party is in charge of the chamber. We're also following, of course, the 36 governors contests across the country, including key races in the critical battlegrounds of Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, and Florida. Here in the CNN Election Center, Dana Bash, Abby Phillip, and Chris Wallace are watching all the important contests. John King's at the Magic Wall. He's getting ready to break down the results, state by state, district by district. Casey Hunt is on the Senate beat. She's following all 35 Senate contests, including the crucial key races. And Boris Sanchez is watching those 36 governors contests across the U.S. At any moment, David Chalian will bring us the first exit polls on what is on the minds of voters. And Brianna Keeler's at our voting desk, watching for any problems at our polling places. Our correspondents are out in force as well, of course, at candidates' headquarters and other key locations across the country. Right now, let's go to Phil Mattingly. He's over at the White House. And Phil, obviously President Biden has a lot riding on what's going to happen today and in the following days. How is he spending these last few hours? What's on his mind?
You know, Jake, over the course of the day, the president has been behind closed doors, called into a couple radio shows, trying to boost some turnout in certain places, spoken to Democratic campaign chiefs, both to thank them for their work and also to ply them for information, I'm told. Now, the president and his actual political team are separated. The political team is a few feet away from the West Wing in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building. And the president is planning to watch returns with his senior team tonight, likely in the residence at some point. And what they're watching right now more than anything else is a handful of those battleground Senate races. When you talk to White House officials, they are keenly aware that between the history and the economic headwinds, the House is likely not going to be held, but they do feel like there is a fighting chance to hang on to the Senate, and they believe that's a reflection of the work that they've done over the course of the last 2 years. Now, keep in mind, the president has made very clear several times over the course of the last few weeks that he believes this is not, in fact, a referendum on his administration. This is a choice between 2 parties, and the White House is trying to echo that, circulating a memo I obtained earlier today, 2 close allies, trying to make the point that the president and his agenda, particularly his agenda, remain popular in isolation. The problem, however, as Democrats have discovered over the course of the last several months, that when inflation remains during 4-decade highs, and some people don't necessarily grapple with everything that's in that agenda, they face real problems. Right now, the White House believes that there will be losses. They hope, at least, to stem some of those losses when it comes to the Senate, Jake.
All right, Phil Mattingly at the White House. Let's go to Jeff Zeleny now in the critical battleground of Georgia. And Jeff, you're at the headquarters of Republican Senate candidate Herschel Walker. That's another state that's going to be key to deciding control. What's the mindset of the Walker camp this evening?
Well, Jake, it's kind of ironic that Herschel Walker's best chance to avoid a runoff election tonight and win outright has less to do with his Democratic rival, Senator Raphael Warnock, than with a Republican on the ticket. Of course, that Republican would be Governor Brian Kemp. All Republicans here all day long, even some Democrats privately, will say that Governor Kemp is in command of this race. They believe that there will not be a runoff election on that side in that contest. And the question is how many Kemp voters, how much Republican strength out there could spill over into the Senate race here. Of course, this Senate race has been one of the most competitive in the country, the second most expensive just right after Pennsylvania. Senator Raphael Warnock, a Democrat who, of course, was elected just at the beginning of January 2021, right after President Biden narrowly won Georgia, has been tied now to this Biden administration. That's what the Walker campaign has been counting on. But again, the question to avoid a runoff election, how much support can they get from Brian Kemp? So really here in Georgia tonight, with one more hour left to vote, Jake, 2.5 million people have already voted. Officials say that they believe about the same number of people will vote today on Election Day. So ironically, the Walker campaign is actually talking a lot to the Kemp fellow Republican campaign tonight, hoping they can pull them over the edge. But of course, we'll see. One more hour to vote here in Georgia. Jake.
All right, David Chalian. I'm sorry, let's go to David Chalian. Thanks to Jeff Zelling. Let's go to David Chalian now, who has our first exit polls. David, what's on the minds of the voters?
Yeah, Jake, first I just want to say these are preliminary initial exit poll results. These are surveys that we've done of voters who voted on Election Day, as well as the tens of millions of voters who voted prior to Election Day. This is a representative sample of the overall electorate. So we want to take a look at what the national environment looks like for voters voting in this midterm election. Feelings about the way things are going in the U.S. This is a bleak picture from this electorate. Look down here. 39% dissatisfied, 34% are downright angry. That's 73%, 3/4 of the electorate tell us they're dissatisfied or angry. Only 5% enthusiastic, 20% satisfied. Joe Biden's approval rating, a key marker in midterm elections. 45% of those voting in this midterm election nationally, 45% approve of the job Biden's doing, 54% disapprove. This kind of looks like what we've seen in a lot of the pre-election polling. He is upside down and he's well below 50% approval. What about Biden as a factor in your vote? Well, he is a factor for about half of those voting today. 18%, though, say the factor is they're supporting Biden with their vote today. 32%, a third of people voting in this election, say they're doing so to oppose Joe Biden. 48%, the other half roughly, say Biden's not a factor at all. And how about Biden policies? Are they helping or hurting the country? Well, according to these early preliminary exit polls, and again, some of these numbers may shift as we get more survey data in, 46% of the electorate says Biden's policies are hurting the country. That's compared to 36%, a smaller portion, who say his policies are helping. 16% say they're not making a difference at all.
David Chalian, some brutal numbers for President Biden right there, Dan. And I have to say, the last one is, to me, the most significant. A plurality, 46% say Biden's policies are hurting the country. 16% not making a difference, which isn't exactly a resounding endorsement either. That's 62% of the people out there who think that his policies are hurting the country or they're not making any difference.
And a third saying that they are using their vote, even though Joe Biden's not on the ballot, to show their opposition to him with regard to Congress or others. To me, though, the whole ball game is that first one. You know, we've covered politics for a long time, and yes, there are things that change a lot. One thing that has never changed is what we call right track, wrong track, whether people just feel good or not about the country. Yeah. And the fact that almost 75%, so 3/4 of Americans are either dissatisfied or downright angry, that is brutal.
You know what this is lining up? Like 3 first-term midterm elections. The first midterm after a new president, 94, Clinton, 2010, Obama, 2018, Trump. And in all of those cases, the president's party, 2 times Democrats, 1 Republican, lost between 40 and 63 seats. When people are unhappy with the state of the country and they don't think the president is helping, they think he's hurting, they take it out on the president's party. And I don't know that we're going to see 40 to 63 seats lost, but it doesn't bode well for the Democrats
And
tonight.
sometimes it's really that simple. I think the candidates and campaigns want to often make it about all kinds of other stuff. But when Americans are unhappy, and in this case, we know they are unhappy about the state of the economy and their pocketbooks, it really kind of boils down to that. And the party in power gets penalized for the sour mood that this electorate is.
Well, I mean, in the reality here, I mean, this number, it's so 25% of people are enthusiastic or satisfied. That means that there are a heck of a lot of Democrats out there who are dissatisfied or angry.
Absolutely. Let's go. David Chalian has some more numbers from the exit polls. David.
Jake, we're taking a look at the issues that are driving voters' decisions in this election. We asked folks in the exit poll, and again, this is preliminary information. We'll get more as the night goes on. What was the most important issue to your vote? Inflation for 32% of the electorate. This is a national look at those showing up to vote today. Interestingly, abortion, 27% of the electorate said it was the most important issue to their vote. That's sort of a closer second than we've seen in a lot of pre-election polling. Crime at 12%, gun policy at the same place, 12%, and immigration down to 10%. But let's dig into that issue number one, inflation. We asked folks, what is the condition of the nation's economy? What you see here is that 3/4 of the electorate, 36% say not so good, poor 39%. Add that together, 75% of the electorate today says thumbs down on the state of the nation's economy. We also asked, has inflation caused harm to your family or hardship to your family? 20% of voters today across the country tell us severe hardship. Another 58% tell us moderate hardship. So that's combined together, nearly 8 in 10 voters are experiencing some kind of hardship. 22% say no hardship. And we asked, how does your financial situation compare to what it was 2 years ago? Sort of the classic political question. 46% of voters in this election across the country are telling us their financial situation is worse than 2 years ago. 35% say about the same. Only 18% say better. And gas prices specifically, as you guys know, the Biden White House has been focused on gas prices every day. Yes, 61% of voters in this election across the country tell us gas prices has been a financial hardship for them. 38% say no, Jake.
All right, David Chalian, thanks so much. And Dana Bash, I mean, again, 75% of the country says the condition of the nation's economy is not so good or poor. 78% of those in the exit poll say the inflation has caused their family severe or moderate hardship. Again, brutal numbers.
Brutal numbers. The first poll that David showed us, which obviously does have inflation at the top, we all know that it's not a surprise. The second one being abortion, and 27% of people saying that that is the most important issue to your vote. Talk to Democrats on the campaign trail in the White House. They say that's the reason why a lot of Democratic candidates are even in the game right now. Not that it's really going to change the outcome ultimately of control, but it at least keeps Democratic candidates.
Well, and what's so interesting is that, and I must say, I am surprised that abortion turns out to be the most important issue for so many people. But Democrats, last time I checked, had spent 10 times more on advertising on abortion than they had on inflation. And I think they're going to look back on that. I mean, clearly, there was a Dobbs mirage. They thought that the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade was going to be a silver bullet and it was going to carry them to victory. But it turns out inflation was the key issue.
I would describe the Dobbs scenario as a mirage. I mean, I think when you talk to Republicans, end of the summer, and Democrats, it was very, very real. It totally changed the dynamic. Democrats will say they had to hit the gas on abortion, maximize that because of what we're seeing in the exits. A full quarter of the electorate came out to vote on that issue. But the problem is, the one thing that sticks around throughout all of this is the economy, and that is what is rearing back to the forefront for so many.
Well, what I thought was pretty interesting here, which David Chalian pointed out, is that the numbers in these exits do not line up with what we were seeing in the polling data going into this election about what people cared about and the order in which they ranked it. So we have had a lot of questions throughout this time about new voters, people that hadn't been in there before that were perhaps not getting captured by the polling. So maybe this is a sign that we're going to see a little bit more of that tonight than we expected. We obviously don't know yet.
And you know what's missing from this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 top 5 issues? Democracy.
Oh, yeah.
It's not even in here. It's not to say that it's not an issue for people, but it doesn't
Not
even
the
come
issue.
close.
Well,
Not
I
the
do
issue.
think that when we looked at the exits where people said, I'm unhappy about the direction the country's going, I'm angry. I wonder how many of that is people who are angry about the
Biden.
state of our politics.
Oh, the state of our politics.
State of our politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Well, it's tough to read these poll numbers without more detail. Obviously, abortion 27%. We don't know that they're all supportive of abortion rights.
I'll tell you though, a lot of, I mean, the partisans think those are all
Sure, and it might make a difference in Pennsylvania, Michigan, et cetera. We're closing in on the first vote tallies of this election night. Straight ahead, a new round of exit polls revealing who turned out to vote and how Donald Trump factored into their choices. Stay with us.
Tonight, voters delivering their verdict on whether Democrats keep control of the House and Senate or hand the keys to Republicans. We're back with CNN's live coverage of Election Night in America. I'm Anderson Cooper, along with our political team. I want to go to the battleground of Pennsylvania. Brian Todd is at a voting location in Gibsonia outside of Pittsburgh. Brian?
Right, Anderson. We're at the post 5 o'clock rush here in Allegheny County. The line getting a little longer at this polling place. Officials here telling us they're expecting more and more people to come after they get off of work now. So this could get very busy. Voter turnout very, very high in Allegheny County from everything we're told from officials here and countywide. We also have some information to report to you from the county spokesperson who told us that the sheriff of Allegheny County not long ago had to take out a cease and desist order for at least 3 people and possibly more who were going around to polling places, according to officials, and posing as election polling security people in an attempt to possibly interfere with some of the voting going on. They issued a cease and desist order. They were trying to find those at least 3 people, possibly more, but they have not been able to find them yet. It's the kind of nuisance activity that, officials here in Allegheny County and all over the country are trying to, nip in the bud before it gets to be too much of a problem. But we were told that they did try to find these 3 individuals posing as election security people, possibly interfering. Was it a case of voter intimidation? We're trying to get some more information on that, but that's just one of the kind of nuisance issues that they've had to deal with. But we are told that the turnout here in Allegheny County, very, very high. And of course, the mail-in balloting is extremely high in Allegheny County, maybe the highest in Pennsylvania. And we're getting officials saying that about 156,000 people have filed mail-in ballots. So that could make a huge difference later on in the evening, Anderson.
Yeah. All right, Brian, we'll check in with you a little bit later. I want to go back to David Challian with a new batch of exit polls. David, what are you seeing?
Hey, Anderson, we're taking a look at sort of the composition of the electorate, different demographics, and what the electorate sort of looks like. We'll first look at this by race. According to these early preliminary exit polls, and again, these numbers will shift as the night goes on a little bit, 76% of voters today across the country, nationally, are white. 9% black, 10% Latino, 2% Asian, 1% Native American, 2% other racial and ethnic groups. I just want to note here, 76% white is significantly a whiter electorate than we saw in the presidential election back in 2020, when 67% of the electorate was white, and when black voters made up 13% of the electorate. So this is a whiter electorate that we're seeing than we saw 2 years ago. Among age groups, 10% say they are 18 to 29-year-olds make up 10% of the electorate, 20% 30 to 44, 36% 45 to 64, 34% are senior citizens. This, too, is a much older electorate than we saw 2 years ago in the presidential, when only 22% of the electorate was 65 and older. We also take a look at the education divide, a crucial sort of line in the American political landscape. 40% of voters today across the country are white voters with a college degree. 36% are white voters without a college degree. 11% voters of color with a college degree. 13% voters of color without a college degree. And finally, just the party makeup, partisan ID here, how people identify. 35% of voters in this election today are Republican, 34% self-identify as Democrat, and 31% self-identify as independent. So a roughly split electorate between D's, R's, and independents, Anderson.
Interesting to see, David Challian. Thanks very much. David Axelrod, you've looked at a lot of exit polls. What are you reading that?
Well, first of all, this is nationwide, so it's a little hard to particularize to the key contests here. I think overall, Democrats would like to see a better turnout among African Americans, among younger voters. That had been the hope, and that had been the concern. And right now, you're seeing in Philadelphia and other cities where there are, in states where there are key races, efforts going there. That would be my main takeaway from that. But again, it could be somewhat different in the battleground states where there's a real effort to try and motivate key constituencies.
I would say also that independent number, I think, is very significant, right? A third of the electorate going out today, independent. Most of those are predicted to break for Republicans. So like in Nevada, I know there's a strong independent turnout in Reno and Las Vegas right now. That's not good for the Democrats at this point in time.
Yeah, that's not good. I just want to say, like,
Van just got real quiet.
Yeah, I'm like, somebody.
Okay, buddy.
Yeah, I'm gonna get you.
You look at all these things together.
Well, wait. I'll say something to make you feel better. Exit polls are really interesting.
Yes.
It is a bit of a witch's cauldron. This is a national sample.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe this gets. I mean, I'm not optimistic for you.
I'm saying, if we assume that that's right, and we have no reason not to assume that that's right, since it's our folks and our folks are best in the world, that's not good for Democrats. I'm just going to say it because
that independent number alone by itself. Look at that.
But Van, 5 o'clock exit polls. You know what? These are going to be very close races.
Sure.
I would, this is interesting. It's a good thing to talk about while we're waiting for people to actually have their votes begin counted. I would not overemphasize this. I do know that some of these things were concerns about minority voters, about young voters.
Latino,
and yes,
too.
independent voters have been breaking. They broke 4 years ago. 4 Democrats, they're breaking against them now.
Van, finish your thought.
I think the concern that we've had as Democrats, we need those young people to come out with great passion. That looks like maybe that didn't happen. If it didn't happen, that's not good for us. We need the African Americans out there. If they're not there, that's not good. And we think the independents may not go. So I just want to be honest. If that's what's going on, that'd make me very happy. What do you think?
My question is, what's the comparison with Latino voters to last time around? Because everything we're seeing in the polls is that Democrats are losing some altitude with Latino voters. So we have to see how that turns out. On the age issue, I mean, this means that like 70% of people voting, perhaps, are over 45.
That's
that's not good for
the 18
Democrats.
to 29 vote. That to me signals that the Democrats focusing so heavily on Roe, thinking that was going to be an animating issue with younger voters, was probably not the case. And it actually signals that a lot of folks just stayed in. To me, that signals distrust that, frankly, politics in general is going to solve the state of our country. The fact that my generation isn't coming out in a big way, I think, is concerning.
Back to the
Mostly
demographic. Back to the demographic splits. Obviously, that's a national sample, but these Hispanic splits and can really have an outsized role in some of these campaigns. You look at some of the races in Texas, Arizona, the Republican numbers in Miami-Dade. I mean, Florida, it strikes me, could blow up huge for Republicans tonight.
Yeah.
And so you've got key races, and as you said, this number of Hispanics that are gravitating towards the Republican, that is going to be, as we head into 2024, if that trend continues, it really is an earthquake for how we analyze these elections.
After months of anticipation, we expect the first midterm votes to be reported in the next hour. Next, we'll lay out the stakes in the 36 governor's races across the country, including contests featuring some diehard 2020 election deniers.
If you're just joining us, we are live in Washington, D.C. We are awaiting the first election results of the night in the fights for control of the U.S. House and Senate. This is CNN's live coverage of election night in America. Our correspondents are in the field across the country. They're covering the final hours of voting in the biggest battleground states. Let's go to Wisconsin. Lucy Kafanov is at a voting site in the suburbs of Milwaukee. Lucy, how are the lines there?
The lines are incredibly long. You can see people stretching, waiting to vote. That line goes in past 2 rooms into a library where folks are actually casting their ballots. It is also stretching in the other direction, out the door outside. Now, we are in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, a suburb west of Milwaukee, population roughly 48,000 people. This area tends to lead more Democratic these days, but in the past, folks have voted for Republicans and Democrats and Libertarians. The former Republican governor, Scott Walker, is actually from this area. Now, we've been speaking to the election officials here, and they say this is unprecedented turnout for a midterm. It is double than what they've seen even in a presidential election, which tends to bring out a lot more people. They have also reported double absentee voter turnout in terms of the ballots that they've received. And we have not even hit the after work rush that is only starting now. It's about 4:30 p.m. local time here. And so it's a sign of just how seriously people are taking this midterm election. The balance of power of the Senate hangs in the balance here. Remains to be seen, of course, which way the state will go.
That's right. Of course, they also have a big governor's race there in Wisconsin. Lucy, thanks so much. Let's go to Nevada, another key and critical battleground state where we find Gary Tuchman. Gary, that's a line of voters behind you? That's not to play blackjack? That's voters.
Not to play blackjack, and we're in a shopping mall, so it's not to buy ice cream, it's not to shop, it's not to go to the movie theater. It is to vote. We've seen up to 100 people waiting to vote here at the Boulevard Mall, which is just to the east of the Las Vegas Strip. This is the most populated county in the state of Nevada. 70% of the 3.1 million people in the state live in this county, and this is one of the most busy polling places. And with us are two voters who we're about to talk to. This is Alexis Minicini on the left, Tracy Ray on the right. I want to ask you first, because you're the lady, Alexis, tell me what made you decide to come out and vote today.
Sure. So I moved to Nevada in April of 2020 at the height of the pandemic. And ever since then, you know, the politics of the pandemic, if you will, have really encouraged me to become more politically involved.
And more left of center scale or more right of center scale?
More left of center scale, to protect the rights that I feel are important to me.
What rights are those the most important?
The most important ones, maybe not for Nevada, but abortion rights, as well as the right to vote and, you know, free speech, making my voice heard.
Tracy Ray, are you from elsewhere also, or are you from Nevada?
Born and raised here.
You're born and raised here. And you were telling me that you used to be a Democrat, now you're a Republican.
I've moved in that direction.
You moved in that direction. What's the reason you came here today, the most important reason?
Well, crime, inflation. Crime and inflation are pretty big in my book.
You say you're more left of center or right of center? Am I guessing right of center?
Little more right.
Okay, so last question I'm going to ask you. We have three big races here: Senate, Governor, Secretary of State. There are other big races too, but those are the three major races. In the Senate race, who are you voting for, Democrat or Republican?
Democrat.
Republican.
Okay. Split decision here in this line of about 100 people. These are new friends who've just met each other, and I hope they stay friends. Jake, back to you.
All right, Gary, thanks so much. Let's talk about the governor's races. They have a big one in Nevada because, John, we're looking at the fact that in 6 states that went for Joe Biden, that voted for Joe Biden just 2 years ago, it is possible that when tonight is over or the week is over, those 6 states not only have Republican governors, but some of them will have governors, Republican governors, who are all in on Donald Trump's election lies.
Right, and those states will be critical again in 2024 and for the foreseeable future in American politics when it comes to picking a president. And think about the Dobbs decision. We'll see how it impacts votes tonight, but abortion is now a state's issue as well. So abortion rights, election denial, administration of democracy. Let's just walk through some of them. One is your home state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro favored in the polls, but we'll see if the polls holds up. Doug Mastriano, as election denial as you can get, tried to help Donald Trump essentially steal Pennsylvania.
He was there on January 6th.
And he was there on January 6th. To this day, says Donald Trump, won in Pennsylvania in 2020, and he just simply didn't.
And in Pennsylvania, the governor appoints the Secretary of State, which means a guy who lies about the election could appoint somebody who lies about the election and doesn't allow democracy to flourish.
Correct. So when you come down to whether it's county absentee ballots certifying, even if the legislators, the governor has to sign the papers that send the Electoral College votes to Washington. So that's just one of them, right? Then you come over to the state of Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer, your Democratic incumbent. Remember, Joe Biden considered her a potential running mate back then. If she can survive in this climate, she will be considered a national Democratic star as we go to 2024 and beyond, but running against another election denier, also somebody who was very restrictive on abortion rights in the primaries, tried to moderate that a little bit in the general. But here, another one, Michigan, one of the key battleground states.
And they have an abortion referendum on the ballot as well.
They do as well, to make the right to an abortion part of the Constitution in the state of Michigan. But there you go, another battleground state, another election denier. You move across here. Tony Evers, the Democratic incumbent in Wisconsin, running against Tim Michels. Tim Michels, in the final weeks of the campaign, said, if you elect me, Republicans will never lose another election in Wisconsin. Imagine that. Now, is that just confidence, or is that you elect me, Republicans will never lose another election in Wisconsin? So in this climate, a statement like that certainly piques interest. So again, someone who has questioned the results of 2020 making a statement like that in one of the ultimate battleground states. Donald Trump won it by 20,000 votes in 2016. Joe Biden won it by 20,000 votes and change in 2020.
People forget what a battleground Wisconsin is, but it really is.
It's one of the most competitive states in American politics. You could argue the most, but it's one of the most. And again, you have a Democratic governor, just like Whitmer across in Michigan, fighting in this climate to hold office. And democracy is very much on the ballot in Wisconsin. So then you move out to the West. We just talked to Gary Tuchman. Here, Sheriff Joe Lombardo running against the Democratic incumbent, Steve Sisolak. And again, Joe Lombardo says Donald Trump won in 2020.
Which, of course, he did not.
He did not. He did not. And so you have it in Nevada as well. And again, a very close, competitive state. The Democrats thought was shifting their way, but we have to, it's purple. And it's at play in presidential elections. Yeah. And you have it. And then you come here. This is probably the poster child of the new Trump candidates running in 2022. And that is the former broadcaster Kari Lake, who, again, says Donald Trump won in Arizona, that Arizona was stolen from Donald Trump. It was not. And the irony of this matchup, or maybe the grace of this matchup, running against the current Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, the Democrat who certified the Arizona results in 2020. And so, again, Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all states absolutely critical to the citizens of those states, but pivotal in American presidential politics. They will be for the foreseeable future.
One other point on Arizona, which is, if we could just go back to that for one second. So yes, Kari Lake, a big election liar, who has said that if she had been governor in 2020, she would not have certified the state. The Republican governor, currently Republican governor, Doug Ducey, did. But one thing I've heard Democrats say about Arizona, as opposed to all the other states, this is the only state, they say, where abortion laws actually changed post-Hobbs, like post-Dobbs. Sorry, Katie Hobbs. But post-Dobbs, it now became illegal in Arizona. With these other battleground states, it pretty much stayed status quo.
And so you guys have just gone through the exit polls. You raised that question. That's one of the things I would say the preponderance of what you went through the exit polls is not good news for the Democrats and Joe Biden.
Definitely not.
The views about the economy, the track of the country, what kind of mood are people in. That abortion number was much higher than in our national poll. Our last national poll had economy inflation at 51 and abortion at 15. So if abortion is rising as an issue, at least in some places, this is one of the places. Let's go back to the 2020 presidential election in Arizona. I mean, this is it. This is where it is decided in Maricopa County. And what is Maricopa County? It is Phoenix and the giant, fast-growing suburbs around here, where you do have a lot of, you would say, moderate voters, moderate Republican voters, inclined to vote for George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, and maybe for Kari Lake on issues like inflation, smaller government, crime, and taxes. But the abortion issue, will that play in the suburbs? So that was one thing that jumped out to me. The bones of the exit polls, what we've seen so far, not good news for the president and the Democrats. But if it's 27% nationally, abortion as an issue, as we go state by, we'll want to see as we go state by state, what is it in the suburbs in Arizona and a place like that. So you can look at a big picture. Those early numbers did not look good for the Democrats, but sometimes there are little pieces within a poll. Then you go to the American suburbs, which will decide these close elections, so we'll see.
And maybe in the American suburbs, it's bigger than 27% as a percentage, and maybe it actually has makes a difference in terms of the margins. We're nearing a significant moment on this election night. The first votes are about to come in. We're also standing by for new exit polls with a new read on the issues that voters care most about. And all of that is coming up and much more. Stay with us.
Looking at a sun setting in Washington, D.C., a metaphor probably in there somewhere, but I'm not going to do that. In Congress could get a shakeup tonight, depending on what voters across the nation are deciding right now. We've got new exit poll information to share with you on the issues voters care most about. David Callahan has that. David?
Anderson, this is sort of like a Venus and Mars election. I want to show you, we were able to look at the most important issue just sort of among the people across the country who said they voted for the Republican candidate in their House of Representatives election. So among those voting for Republicans today in this election, inflation, 47% say most important issue. Nothing else comes close. Immigration at 14%, crime at 13%, abortion at 11%, gun policy at 8%. Now I want to show you the other side of the equation. Among those voting for the Democrat in their House of Representatives election today, 44% say abortion was the most important issue to their vote. This mirrors what we just saw on the Republican side. 15% say gun policy, 15% say inflation, 11% crime, 6% immigration. Now, about that abortion issue, now we were going to look nationally at all voters, okay? Everyone voting today, according to these exit polls, we asked, should abortion be legal in all cases, illegal in all cases? 30% say abortion should be legal in all cases. 30% say abortion should be legal in most cases. 27% illegal in most cases, 9% illegal in all cases. This is that 60-40 issue in favor of abortion rights, why Democrats thought it might be wise for them to lean into this. Then we asked, what are your feelings about Roe versus Wade being overturned? And you see that same 60-40 split. 16% enthusiastic and 21% satisfied. That's 37% total there. But look at this, 21% dissatisfied, and 4 in 10 voters today in this election are downright angry about Roe v. Wade being overturned.
David Jelly, fascinating to see that. Alyssa, I mean, it's really just the tale of two Americas.
Yeah, it's split screen America. I mean, completely different motivating factors. We knew Republicans were going to be motivated around the economy. I think Democrats failed to really deliver a coherent message around the economy and why folks should turn out for them on that issue, that things were going the right way. So most of the ads did focus on reproductive rights. So I'm not surprised that that was the motivating factor getting folks out to the poll. But the numbers are kind of a stunning breakdown. If you think about it, our country's basically broken into 3 different blocks on how you view the abortion issue. And there's really not a whole lot of overlap between the two parties.
But I think what's interesting is that only 9% of voters say never in any circumstances. And you have so many Republicans now out over their skis with such an extreme position saying that people shouldn't be able to get those services. And I don't think that now we can kind of in the cold, political calculation say it wasn't wise to focus on abortion. But it was terrifying to have the Supreme Court come down and wipe out rights for people and to abandon American women to, sometimes horrific fates. And so it wasn't just calculation. Sometimes you actually believe in stuff. Sometimes you actually care about issues and people, and then that was why I think we leaned in so hard on abortion.
But Van, I think these numbers actually show that the Democrats had a point focusing on abortion. When you look at the difference between Democrats and Republicans, I mean, among Democrats, 44%, abortion the most important issue. They needed to talk about other issues that also appeal to independent voters. But when you look at, if you're trying to get your base out, this wasn't a bad issue to talk about.
We'll go back to David Jelly with more. David?
Anderson, we're also going to take a look here at the Trump factor. We talked a little earlier about the Biden factor in this election. So now we're taking a look at these exit polls and what they tell us about the Trump factor in this election. Again, this is the national exit poll, people voting for the House of Representatives. These are preliminary numbers, but 16% of people going to the polls today or voted in advance of today say their vote was to support Donald Trump. 28% say their vote was to oppose Donald Trump. And a majority, 54%, say Trump was not a factor. How about Trump's standing with the electorate today in these midterm elections? Just the opinion of him overall. 37% of voters in this midterm election have a favorable view of Donald Trump. 60% of voters in this midterm election across the country have an unfavorable view. We also tried to get a sense of how that compares to how people view the Republican Party. 43% of voters in this election have a favorable view of the Republican Party. A majority, 53%, have an unfavorable view of the party. And then we asked, is the Republican Party too extreme? A slim majority, 54%, say yes, it is too extreme. 44% say no, the Republican Party is not too extreme.
Let's check in with David Urban. What do you think?
Yeah, so listen, I think, interestingly, Donald Trump has been uncharacteristically quiet until maybe 48 hours ago, right? I think we were talking about this until he kind of popped up on the screen and maybe I'm going to run for president, maybe I'm not. And then recently in the past 24 hours, he's been just kind of trying to steal the narrative again. So it's not surprising to me that people say Trump didn't really play into anybody's facts. He's been on Truth Social, been otherwise absent. And Democrats are smart because I think they've figured this out. They can't just run against Trump. So they've been kind of quiet about it as well. So those numbers aren't surprising.
Yeah, although I have to say, I look at these numbers and a similar number of people said that, they're voting to express support for Trump and oppose him as the numbers were for Biden, a sitting president. So Donald Trump has really been a big piece of this, even though he's been quiet. And I think one of the reasons that you have so many people saying the Republican Party is extreme, the fact that he pushed candidates forward who were judged primarily by their ability, their willingness to deny the last election. And with it came all kinds of other stuff.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
But Biden's unfavorability, we knew was high going into this. We knew that was going to affect the midterms. But it's interesting to note that Trump's is even higher at a time as he's toying
lower.
or even lower. I'm sorry. Yes. And I think that's the fact that Republicans are still expected to do better despite the leader of the party being even less favorable than the sitting president is interesting.
Yeah, and well, I mean, they've done it before. In 20, Trump was losing, and we obviously picked up seats in the House. You know, if you're just looking this through the lens of Biden and Trump in this potential rematch, which no one's excited about, but I mean, sitting here tonight, Trump is sitting at 37-60, Biden is sitting at 45-54. A question that potential opponents of Donald Trump in the upcoming primary are going to say is, well, should I tell my voters it's not a sure bet that he would beat Joe Biden? Can I raise a point, by the way, about the abortion question? I didn't get a chance a minute ago, and legal in all cases is 30%. That is the Democratic position. Every other position on here, legal in most cases, that's the Lindsey Graham position. Illegal in most cases, some Republicans, illegal in all. So the Democratic position is legal in all cases, 30. Everything else is some variance of a Republican position.
Republicans didn't want the Lindsey Graham position.
A lot of Republicans do like that position.
Well,
15 weeks and the 3 exceptions.
But they didn't want to vote on it before the election, if you'll recall.
What do you mean vote on
They
it?
did. Well, Lindsey Graham.
Ben, I just want to correct the record here. Safe, legal, and rare is where 80% of Americans are. Okay, most Americans are in some reasonable place in the middle. Are there extremists in both parties that say, you know, no exceptions, whatever? But the reality is the Democratic position is much more reflective of where Americans are coming from. Listen, Lindsey Graham went out there and tried to raise that. He got left at the altar by your party. So I don't think you can pretend you're in a better place than we are.
Is there a Democrat in this country that ran on a single limitation on abortion in a major race?
Sure.
No, Tim Ryan didn't even. I expected
Tim Ryan
did. In the Senate vote, by the way, Scott's right, in the Senate vote, which was taken, every senator voted for abortion.
I asked
No
Val
limits
Demings today if she believed in any abortion, including in the 3rd trimester, and she said no.
Fetterman did not. Demings did not. 30% of the country, legal in all cases. Everything else is a Republican position.
Scott, the position of most Democrats is the position that is the majority position in this country, which is this is primarily a decision between a woman and her doctor. B, that most of these decisions are made early in pregnancies, not late, and that there should be exceptions even in later in pregnancy when a woman's health is involved. And so that's the mainstream position. I don't honestly think you're going to want to go into a general election in 2024 arguing what you're arguing here, and we'll see how.
But nobody can articulate a single limitation that a Democrat candidate laid out in this election. What you're saying sounds reasonable.
Every Democrat pretty much embraced Roe versus Wade, which had limitations.
Exactly. What was the Senate vote on the Schumer bill? I mean, the Democratic candidates, when asked over and over, could not articulate a limit.
But you know what Roe versus Wade was, right?
I'm familiar with it.
Yes, it had limitations. It basically
the Schumer bill did not, though.
Right.
Roe versus Wade had limitations, and they reflect generally what people feel in this country.
I don't believe a statewide candidate.
Which is why, by the way, in this and every other survey you see, about 2/3 of the country were unhappy with that decision.
It's also,
but it would be interesting as a strategist if you want to go in there.
I'm just looking at the numbers.
But let me say one thing about Trump, if I can.
Yeah.
Can I just say one word about Trump?
I want to add something too on Trump.
The problem for the Republican Party is that you can't live with Trump and you can't live without him. Candidates can't get nominated without him, and you can't win a lot of general elections with him. The reason your candidates are struggling in places where they maybe shouldn't be struggling is because he nominated people primarily on their fealty to him, and it's created a big problem for you.
The one interesting thing also about Trump on this exit poll is that 54% of people said Trump was not a factor. That will disappoint Donald Trump tremendously, since he thinks if his candidates win, he should be given credit. But if I'm a 2024 candidate, and I think you were talking about this a little bit, Scott, and I see that unfavorable rating for Donald Trump, and you think of a Trump Biden potential matchup,
Yeah.
I would be saying this is the only guy who can lose this election.
I think he's still going to make it through the primary. Right? That's what we're all
But I think there's
the more candidates there are, the more likely he is to make it through the primary.
To Gloria's point, though, I think that there's a certain governor of Florida who's going to, skate to re-election tonight, who's going to see these numbers and think maybe I should consider getting in. Yeah, I think this is very vulnerable.
There are a lot of Republicans who would say, how could we possibly lose to Biden again? You look at this and you can see how it could happen right here.
We're on the brink of getting the first votes of the night. Stay with us. Election night in America. This is CNN.
It's a high-stakes night here in Washington, D.C., as voters across the United States are having their say about control of Congress and so much more. We're standing by now for the first votes this hour. I'm Jake Tapper with our team in the CNN Election Center, and we are nearing our first chance to make projections in the critical fight for control of Congress. At 7 p.m. Eastern, voting ends in Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vermont, and Virginia. Some polling places in Indiana and Kentucky are closing right now, and votes from those areas could start coming in at any moment. This is what it would take for Republicans to take back the House. They need to win 218 seats to win the majority. That's 5 more seats than they have now. The battle will take place in 82 key House races, competitive contests that really could go either way. In the closely divided Senate, Republicans need 51 seats to take back control. That's only 1 more seat than they already have. We're watching 13 key races that will be crucial to the fight for control of the U.S. Senate. We're also following the 36 governors contests across the country, including key races in a number of critical battlegrounds. Our election team is in position for a very busy night, including Dana Bash, Abby Phillip, and Chris Wallace. Over at the Magic Wall, John King is standing by. He'll track the results and give us perspective on the votes that have not yet been reported. Casey Hunt's following all 35 Senate contests, including the crucial key races, as we get closer to the first results. And Boris Sanchez is watching those 36 governors contests across the United States. David Chalian will soon share more exit poll information as polling places close. And Brianna Keeler is at our voting desk, keeping us up to date on how and when the ballots are counted in each state. Our election team is fanned out across the United States, including at the headquarters of the top candidates. Right now, let's go to 2 of the top battlegrounds in the fight for the Senate. Kate Baldwin is in Pennsylvania at the headquarters of Republican Senate candidate Dr. Mehmet Oz. And Kate, what are you hearing there in Newtown from Oz's campaign headquarters about their expectations for the night?
Well, I'll tell you, Jake, Mehmet Oz's campaign, they are describing it as feeling a continued sense of confidence, if you will. That's how they're describing it to me as they wait for votes to be counted here in Pennsylvania. And from another source, a Republican close to the campaign, describing the feeling as cautiously optimistic, but still nervous, saying that they feel good, that they really left it all in the field. Now, the campaign believes that they closed out this race on a high note, pointing to the big crowd that they saw in the Philadelphia suburbs last night with the final rally that Mehmet Oz held. We were there, we saw it. And they also believe that in the end, the campaign is pointing to at this point, Jake, that they believe that they have gotten into the good position that they believe that they are in because of one factor specifically, the contrast that they drew in their message, the contrast of balance, bringing balance to Washington, and contrasting that, as Mehmet Oz describes it over and over again, as extremism on both sides. That is what the campaign says they feel good about. And a source telling CNN they believe the message really resonated with voters and that they've defined Fetterman in a way that stuck with voters. We'll see tonight, Jake.
All right, Kate Baldwin at Oz headquarters in Newtown, Pennsylvania. Let's go to another important race in Georgia. Eva McKend is at the headquarters of Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock. He is running for re-election in a very, very tough fight. What's the mood there among the Warnock campaign folks?
Well, Jake, Georgia Democrats will tell you they always knew that this race was going to be incredibly close. What we have seen, though, is Republican newcomer, former NFL star Herschel Walker, really mount an aggressive challenge. And Warnock is trying to stave off that challenge. Notably, he has been confident in the last several weeks, but Warnock has been telling his supporters, look, we do not want this to go into overtime. He has 2 ads up in the state saying just that. The Democrats need to come out and vote to avoid a December runoff. If neither Walker or Warnock get above 50%, then this goes for another several weeks. That is something that they are trying to avoid. You don't hear Walker talking about a potential runoff as much, but Warnock is. I asked him about this. Why is this a concern? He says, listen, and he reiterated this again today, that he is prepared to win tonight. But that he's also prepared for this possibility as well. You know, his potential success in this state really, I think, underscores the challenge that Georgia Democrats face. Really, it is a test. His potential success is a test to see if Georgia Democrats can pull out a victory, even though that this is a difficult midterm map for Democrats across the country. If Warnock wins here, it will illustrate that the way that he has run his campaign, really focusing on his bipartisan credentials, can work in a state that is so competitive like this one, Jake.
All right, Eva McCann in Atlanta at the headquarters of Senator Raphael Warnock. We have another snapshot for you now on what is on the minds of voters. Let's go back to David Chalian, who has exit polls. David.
Jake, we are looking at these preliminary exit polls. I just want to make sure everyone understands some of these numbers will change throughout the evening. Also, this exit poll does represent voters who voted before Election Day in absentee by mail vote or early in-person vote, as well as Election Day voters. We wanted to take a look at how confident people feel about their votes being fairly and accurately counted in this election. Obviously, a big conversation. Very confident, 50%. Of voters nationwide in this midterm election, very confident that their state elections are fair and accurate. 30% somewhat confident, so 8 and 10 have a level of confidence. 13% not very confident, 6% not at all confident. We also wanted to ask the straight-up question, do you believe Joe Biden was legitimately elected president back in 2020? You see the results here. 63% of voters across the country, yes, believe Joe Biden was indeed legitimately elected. But a third of voters in this election do not believe that Joe Biden was the legitimately elected president in 2020, which brings in this concern about democracy. Do you think that democracy in the United States is secure or threatened? 9% say it's very secure. 19% voters nationwide, somewhat secure. 33% somewhat threatened. And the plurality, 37% of voters today believe that U.S. democracy is very threatened, Jake.
David Chalian, thanks so much. That is a shocking number, Dana Bash. 1/3 of the American people think that Joe Biden did not legitimately win the presidency in 2022. He did, of course, win legitimately the presidency in 2020. I mean, it's almost as if 1/3 of the country believes that the moon landing was faked.
It's soul-crushing. It is. Not because of who we're talking about, but because of what we're talking about. We're talking about truth and facts and reality, and this is just the latest piece of evidence that the former president has been able to convince most of his supporters that it's not true, that he did not lose the election.
Well, you know, I mean, I think the other part of this to me is that I hear all the time from Republicans, oh, this is just a fringe view. This is not a dominant view. 34% of the country, that's a lot of people. That is millions and millions of people. And I don't see really a lot of people owning up to that and doing anything about it. I think it's deeply problematic for the country. But in spite of that, it's somewhat surprising that 80% or so of the country also thinks the elections are being run well or fairly. I mean, I think both things are happening at the same time, which is just bizarre.
You know, my first election, I go back a ways, as a kid, was Kennedy-Nixon in 1960. Very close election. Real questions as to whether Kennedy stole Illinois, whether he and Johnson stole Texas. But after the election was over, there was never any doubt. John Kennedy was the president. And from then until now, 62 years, well, I'd say 60 years, but from 2020 on, suddenly this new issue has come up, to my knowledge, where there is a real doubt as to whether the president is really the president and whether the election was fair or was stolen. It's a paradigm shift in my lifetime.
One thing that I would just underscore here, though, is that we should remember this is just people who voted today that we're surveying in these exit polls, which is not, of course, representative of the entire country. But I do think it underscores the importance of leadership or lack thereof, right? I mean, there have been so many questions, and there's a reason why many people will ask. I mean, I've spent years on Capitol Hill in hallways asking Republicans, why are you not condemning this, standing up to it? Why are you going along with this? You know, I think it really shows the impact of the silence of so many Republican candidates who've gone along with the way Donald Trump has presented this.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, if a majority of Republicans in Washington and governor's offices throughout the country were able to say, you know, of course Joe Biden was legitimately elected, that would maybe make a difference, but they're not. They're pretty quiet about it, most of them. David Chalian, you have more for us now on the exit polls.
Jake, just a little while ago, we were looking at the Republican Party and whether voters thought the party was too extreme or not. We learned that a majority of voters in this election did think 54% thought the Republican Party was too extreme. We asked that about the Democratic Party as well. And guess what? A slim majority of voters in this election, 51%, roughly equal here, think that the Democratic Party is too extreme. 47% say no, it is not. We also wanted to test some issues and ask, which party do you trust to handle some of these top issues? So which party do you trust to handle inflation? 54% of voters in this election, a majority, trust the Republican Party on inflation. 42% the Democrats. Which party do you trust to handle abortion? It's sort of the reverse here. 52% Democrats are trusted to handle the issue of abortion. 43% Republican. And which party do you trust to handle crime? This is back to a Republican advantage among voters in this election, according to these exit polls. 52% trust the Republicans on crime. 42%, Jake, trust the Democrats on the issue.
All right, David Chalian with exit polls. So do I have that right? Majorities of the voters think that both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are too extreme?
I don't think that should be a huge surprise. Look, most Americans think these
Welcome
parties,
to America in 2022.
Yeah, they just think these parties are too in the pocket of their extreme camps. And even when they cast their ballot for one party or the other, it doesn't necessarily signal a wholesale approval.
But just do the math for me on that. So 40% think that the other party is too extreme, and then there's like 10 to 15% that just think that both parties are too extreme.
Because for people who think that the other party is, look, I think it's that people are well aware of the times that they're living in, that these are very, very polarized times. So even if they are part of that polarization, they can see it, which there's no question adds to the despair that people are feeling about how this country is going.
The other interesting finding here, I think, is the one on crime. You know, you figure that people are going to think Republicans inflation, Democrats abortion, but the Republicans were really effective in the last couple of months of this campaign in hammering Democrats as soft on crime. It made a big difference in Pennsylvania. Oz did it to Fetterman. Big difference in Wisconsin, where Johnson has done it to Mandela Barnes, and it's really done made a big difference in New York State in the governor's race, where Lee Zeldin, in a state that there hasn't been a Republican governor since 2006, with George Pataki, Zeldin might beat Kathy Hochul tonight.
But, you know, to go back quickly, and they did it at the right time, too, Chris, right at the end of the campaign. To go back to your point about the extremism here, I think it also underscores, like, the people that are engaged in our political system are the people that are on the most extremes. There are a lot of people who don't vote, who don't show up, and they're the people that are just turned off by the entire thing. And what you're left with is the most extreme on each side.
Very interesting. So this election night really gets going soon with the first big round of poll closings and results. That includes Battleground, Georgia. We're going to go there live next. Stay with us. This is the night when voters are deciding whether or not to reshape the political landscape here in Washington, D.C. We are back with our live coverage of this very important midterm election. Let's check in on voting in the key battleground state of Arizona. Sarah Seidner is at a voting location in Tempe, Arizona. And Sarah, it's a few more hours before the polls close there. What are you seeing?
The lines have gotten really long here on the Arizona State University campus. They have now quadrupled from when we initially started here this morning. Lots of folks out here, a lot of students out here, but we're also starting to see some folks who aren't students who are voting at this location. And here in Maricopa County, you can vote anywhere because they're able to print out the ballot that marks exactly who you are and has all the issues and people that you need to vote for in your specific area. Now, I do want to give you an update because there were some voting issues in Maricopa County this morning that somebody basically put out to the public. Now they've investigated it, and what they found is that some of the printers at about a fifth of the locations, the 223 vote centers, were not having ink that was dark enough to mark the ballots. They have fixed that in 41 vote centers so far, according to Maricopa County spokesperson Fields Mosley. Now, we are learning that there are less than 30 that still need to be fixed, but what the county wants everyone to know is that no matter what happens, even if there's a problem with the tabulation machine that isn't printing properly, that doesn't have the proper ink, that they are going to count your vote. You can either take your ballot and put it into that machine, which has a lockbox, and they will pick it up and they will take it to the tabulation center, or they will take your ballot to the tabulation center and make sure that your vote is counted. They have been saying that over and over and over again. They do understand that people are concerned about this, that this is blown up on social media, but they are being very clear that no one, not a single voter, will be disenfranchised, that your vote will be counted. Jake?
All right. Well, transparency is always the key to clearing up situations like that. Sarah Seidner, thanks so much. Let's go to our voting desk now. Brianna Keeler. Brianna, you're looking at two other key battlegrounds, Georgia and Pennsylvania.
That's right, because there are two states, Jake, that could keep us on the edge of our seats tonight. In Cobb County, Georgia, officials have extended the deadline for more than 1,000 absentee ballots. They weren't sent out due to procedural errors, and those ballots will now be accepted until November 14th. Also, there are 6 precincts statewide that have been ordered to stay open past the 7 p.m. deadline, 2 in Cobb County, 2 in DeKalb County in the Atlanta area, and 2 other precincts in smaller counties, all because those polling locations opened late this morning. Something to watch in Georgia. Candidates in nearly every race must get more than 50% of the vote to win. Any race that doesn't meet that threshold will go to a runoff election between the top 2 candidates. That will be held this year on December 6th. And then in Pennsylvania, Luzerne County polls will stay open until 10 p.m. tonight after a county judge said voters there were disenfranchised and denied the fundamental right to vote through no fault of their own. This was the result of a paper shortage, which resulted in the inability to print paper ballots there. In Philadelphia, an election official said nearly 3,600 mail ballots are at risk of being rejected because of incorrect information, missing dates, or secrecy envelopes. People who were not able to cure their ballots at City Hall, that means go there to fix the mistakes they made, can still vote in person today. And the Philadelphia City Commissioner tells CNN that more than 100,000 mail ballots have been received throughout the county and are being processed, Jake.
All right, Brianna, thanks so much. I'm here with John King at the Magic Wall to take a look at some of the Senate races we're going to be keeping an eye on, and also the governor's races. John, what do you got for us?
So I want to follow up what Brianna said in just a minute, but first, if I could just ask you guys to turn this way for 1 second. I just want to show it. Those are your very first votes of the 2022 midterms.
We just saw it pop in.
They're coming in now in these 4 congressional districts in Indiana. They're very early votes. We'll get back to them a bit later. They're not in competitive districts. They're in what are
competitive district is right there.
Right there. You're right. The district that has Gary, Indiana, is right next to it.
We're keeping an eye on that one.
That's good. But you see, that's our first votes, and that's the wonder of democracy, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. And I wanted to point that out to be a little bit of the crank in the room following Brianna there. Stay off social media, people, if you're trying to figure out, are there really issues with votings? Trust your local officials. Trust us here. Trust a news source that you know and trust to be honest about this. They're doing their jobs and they're doing it right. So what was Brianna just talking about? She was talking about Cobb County, Georgia. That is right up here, just outside of Atlanta. It matters, right? It's 7% of the state population. Joe Biden carried it by 14 points. So in the race for Senate, in the race for governor, in any race in this area, Cobb County matters. You heard Brianna talking about polling places staying open. Georgia did a very good job counting its votes in 2020. It will do a very good job counting its votes tonight, whether we're talking at the county level or the statewide level. if polls are being left open or if they're doing some things, it's because if something little happened. Somebody had a problem with their password, like happens to us every day at the office, right?
Right.
Or if one of the machines...
Running out of ink in Maricopa County.
Running out of ink in Maricopa County. Life happens even in elections, but you have to trust people. She also talked about Luzerne County. This is critical again. You have a big governor's race. You have a big Senate race. You have competitive House races. This is a county Donald Trump won by 14 points. Absolutely critical to Mehmet Oz tonight, a place where if Doug Mastriano is going to be competitive in the race for governor, it happens to be here tonight. You see Wilkes-Barre here, the more rural areas as you get out here. Let's just use the 2020 map to show this and come into the presidential area. This is Trump country right here. And so they're going to leave the polls open until 10 o'clock because there were some issues this morning. That's what a good judge does. That's what a good county election official does.
And look, it's a Republican county, and the fact of the matter is the judge did the right thing. There was a paper shortage. He wants to make sure no one's disenfranchised. He's holding the polls open in that one county, Luzerne County, until 10 o'clock. Great. God bless. It's not a conspiracy.
Right. And that's why look, we're going to take our time tonight going through the results, but when you see there are, in the case of Arizona, there are Republicans, including the former president's son, tweeting up this conspiracy storm already about the vote count.
Oh, and the former president himself as well.
Yeah, in Arizona. Trust the people who do this. If there are, again, both parties have observers in the room whenever anything like this is coming up. And so they can go to court, they can raise their hand, they can protest. This is being done fairly and as it goes. And I just wanted to come back here. Let's just take a peek. Let's just show votes. Because
you can't resist.
Right. This is what we like to do, right? So you have a vote here. The incumbent is up 68%. It's only 3% of the vote. It's a Republican district. The incumbent here is likely to win. Let's just move up to Indiana's 5th district. Victoria Spartz is the
first Ukrainian-born member of Congress.
Right. She is leading in her district. We're doing this for a reason. These are not competitive districts, but this is how it works. Jim Banks, a key member of the House Republican leadership, if the Republicans do take the House tonight, Jim Banks will be a name, if you don't live in Indiana and you haven't heard it before, you will be hearing a lot in the weeks and months ahead. A conservative rising star. We'll see if there are competitive elections, whether he wins or loses. But in the Republican leadership here and again,
these are all red seats.
Right,
the one battleground that we're looking for is this one, and there's nothing in there yet.
Right, nothing yet, and we're still waiting here. The polls have not closed here yet. In this part of the state, the polls are still open, at least in parts of this district, so you won't get any of the results. And Gary, Indiana, I've been doing this for a while, tends to be slow counting the votes. There are quirks and stuff, but they count them. They come in.
Can we go to Philly for a second?
Yes, we can.
So we had an inaccurate graphic about some ballots in Philly that were not going to be counted because they'd been filled out incorrectly. The graphic said 36,000. It's actually 3,600. There's actually 3,600 ballots that were filled out incorrectly. And if you're concerned that yours is one of them, the voting is still open in Philadelphia. You can go figure it out and vote.
And again, most of this is a minor issue. The great, he says he's retired now because he doesn't like what his party does anymore about elections. But Ben Ginsburg, the Republican attorney who represented George W. Bush and Bush v. Gore, was here earlier. He says most of them are, people forgot to put the date on the outside envelope, right? So you open it up. If the signature's right, the address is right, the date's right on the inside, then that's a legal ballot. If there's no date on the outside, then you get inside and the address is wrong or the signature seems wrong, then you set it aside and the Democrat and the Republican and the independent person in the room sort it out over time.
Right.
So many of these can be cured. That's the ballot term for fixed. Just you come down, verified. You come down and verify, you show your ID, that's me, I'm sorry, I forgot to fill out the date. You fill it in and it's done.
Yep. And we're going to be doing this all night. We're nearing the first big round of poll closings. We're also getting our first snapshot of what voters are thinking in a make-or-break battleground, the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, home to that key Fetterman-Oz Senate race. We have a new round of exit polls. That's next. Stay with us.
Direction of Congress and the future of the Biden agenda are in the hands of voters right now. I'm Anderson Cooper. We are heading into the first big round of poll closings on this election night. Tracking all the key contests and battlegrounds, we want to go to one of the top battleground, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Jason Carroll outside a ballot processing center in Philadelphia. Jason, you're learning about some frustration among officials there.
Right, that's right. This is the processing center where all the votes coming out of Philadelphia will be counted, as you know. And already city officials are telling us that this is a process that was going to take a long period of time. Now it's going to take even longer, and that's because of something called voter reconciliation. Basically, the results of a GOP lawsuit, the city decided just in terms of full transparency, to reinstate this policy of how they count votes, which is going to make things take even longer. Basically, what this means is what they're doing is this process is meant to catch people who accidentally voted twice, once by mail-in and once in person. So in order to make sure that that doesn't happen, they've reinstituted this policy. So that means it's going to take even longer to count all of these votes. And when I spoke to a city official, I said, well, how long are we talking here and how many votes are we talking about? She said it could be thousands, it could be hundreds of thousands. Again, thousands to hundreds of thousands of votes that are coming in to Philadelphia. So we knew this process was going to take a long period of time. Now we're hearing, Anderson, it could take even longer. But city officials say that they feel confident about how they're doing things here. They say they're going to be here around the clock until every single vote is counted. But again, they wanted the public to know that even though this was something that was going to take a long time, now you know why it may take even longer. Anderson?
Jason Carroll, appreciate it. We're getting our first glimpse into what Pennsylvania voters are thinking in our exit polls. Let's go back to David Chalian for that. What are you seeing, David?
Anderson, I just want to remind folks again, both with the national exit poll and now that we're going to look at some state exit polls, this is representative of the overall electorate, whether people voted before Election Day or absentee by mail or early in person, or they voted today on Election Day. This is a survey that represents the whole of the electorate. In Pennsylvania specifically, we're looking at the Trump and Biden factors because both the president and the former president were in Pennsylvania for the final weekend of campaigning. They both saw it as a critical battleground for their party. So Joe Biden's approval rating in Pennsylvania, according to Pennsylvania voters in this election, he's got a 46% approval rating, 54% disapprove. This is a tick better than we see him nationally, which may be why it's the only battleground state Joe Biden was really campaigning in. Donald Trump's favorability numbers here are interesting. 40% of the Pennsylvania electorate today views him favorably, 58% unfavorable. That is a significant downtick from the 47% who viewed him favorably just 2 years ago when he narrowly lost the state to Joe Biden. And then how much of a factor was Joe Biden in the vote for Pennsylvanians today? Well, 52%, a slim majority, say not a factor, but if he was a factor, it was more negative. 32% voted to oppose Biden, 14% to support Biden. We also looked at that same question with Donald Trump among Pennsylvania voters. A significant majority, 57%, not a factor, but where he was a factor, it was more negative than positive. 24% opposed Trump, 18%, Anderson, of Pennsylvania voters today said they voted to support Donald Trump.
David Chalian, thanks. We'll come back to you shortly. David Urban, you know Pennsylvania well?
Statistically, I think, you look at the Biden-Trump not a factor, they're pretty similar. I think David Axelrod noted earlier, and David Chalian just mentioned that drop, that 7% drop in Trump's favorability numbers over the past 2 years, I think is telling. And about this race in particular, right? Remember, the former president weighed in the primary here and both the governor's race and the Senate race and created a great amount of discord amongst all these different candidates. And so there are a lot of people going to the polls tonight voting for a Republican that's not their candidate. And they may be doing so thinking that Trump, precluded them from voting for their person, whether it's Lou Barletta or Dave McCormick or whomever, and that may be weighing in on this number.
Yeah, one of those candidates is Doug Mastriano, who's really emblematic of the most extreme elements of the Republican Party. Yet Trump dropped from -5 to -18 in terms of the differential between positive, favorable, and unfavorable. But you can see here why Dr. Oz was so cross-pressured at the end when Trump decided he was going to rally in Western Pennsylvania. For most of the last few weeks, Dr. Oz has been trying to erase Trump from the whole discussion and pitch himself as a moderate because, as you know, the Philadelphia suburbs are pivotal in these races.
Philadelphia suburbs, and the poll earlier, we saw those exit numbers, a third are independents, right? A third of the folks showing up are independents. Those independents probably, they're not so aligned with Donald Trump, needless to say.
Can I just say, usually when a politician is out of office for a bit, your favorables go up.
That's right.
Because people aren't hearing from you all the time, and they're not as sick of you as they were before you left office or got defeated. This is just the opposite. Donald Trump has been out of office, and people like him less in the state of Pennsylvania. And to David's point, that's why the Oz people were not thrilled.
But don't underestimate. I'm telling you, I was there on the ground. This inter-party scrum and the primary.
Yeah.
really bruised up you go back and look on social media, people said, I'm done with Trump. I've had it with him. These are Republican county leaders in the party. So,
Scott?
This was why this race looked so far apart over the summer. I mean, coming out of that primary, Oz had horrific image issues, and they were really persistent throughout. I'm not sure he ever got right side up, where his faves were higher than his unfaves. And you throw Donald Trump being at 40 versus Biden at 46 on top of that. And so if I'm in the Democratic position looking at this, it gives me some belief that maybe things were better. Again, we don't know yet. The votes haven't been cast and certainly haven't been counted yet. But I have always thought of the big three: Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada. Pennsylvania was the one I was most unsure about in terms of would the macro political wins be enough, and we'll see what happens.
Well, and on that point, I think Pennsylvania is going to be a race that is hyper-local and a state-driven race. And I think if any of the contests is the one we're probably most likely to see a split ticket. I think we all are pretty confident Shapiro is going to win the governor's race. But this is something where you could see an Oz Republican win on the Senate race, because I'm not sure it's totally a referendum on Biden nor Trump. I think it's frankly the issues that voters care about.
And honestly, I was concerned that the Biden numbers would be worse than they are for the people who went to vote. This is actually, Biden is not more of a disaster for us than Trump. And a lot of people, frankly, they're voting for their pocketbooks. They're concerned about democracy. They're voting for abortion. They're voting for other issues. And so the idea that, and that may be one reason why we weren't afraid to have Biden come to Pennsylvania.
And I would just say the three other races that are going to drive this, that we talked about and John King has. PA 7, PA 8, PA 17, right? Those are very competitive House races. And those are localized, so people are going to, they're voting there, they're voting for their person there, and that's going to kind of trickle up on the ballot as well. So
I don't think we can underestimate the Josh Shapiro factor here. Very, very popular Democrat. And that's why, you see folks saying, well, Trump really wasn't a factor here, Biden wasn't a factor here. I mean, you're voting for your governor, don't forget. You're voting for somebody, you're talking about your local taxes, your everything else that has to do with your family, schools, whatever. And I think Josh Shapiro you're right. I mean, by all accounts, he's going to win and win handily. And, this is why Oz needed to walk this really fine line.
And I think part of why Fetterman, had to make that drastic 180 on fracking is Pennsylvania, the second largest energy producing state, because it is a hyper-state driven race. And he's not running on a national platform. He is running for the state of Pennsylvania.
Several races where governors have maybe an outsized impact on the Senate race. Arizona, obviously, Kerry Lake may drag Masters a little bit. Brian Kemp in Georgia may drag up Herschel Walker a little bit. In Pennsylvania, Shapiro, if he does quite well, you can see him dragging up.
But remember, in Pennsylvania, you don't go in and pull the straight lever anymore, right? You got to vote line by line. They changed that with Act 77. And so in the Biden year, right, Biden wins, you elect 2 statewide Republicans in the same year. So
I would just say on the approval rating, it is every candidate has to try and deal with the president's approval rating. 46 is pretty good. Yeah. There's not much of a gap there. You don't have to make up too much of a gap there. There are some states where candidates are dealing with Biden's approval rating at 40 or below.
Right.
That's a lot of distance to make up.
Well, he's from there.
The number to me has always been 45. If you've got the incumbent president at 45, you can see somebody outrunning it by 4 or 5, but you get down below into 44, 43, 42, it's a long jump. I want to see.
You think this race could, in Pennsylvania for Senate, it could go either way?
Yeah, look, even when I was Arnold Specter's chief of staff, who was an incumbent senator for years and years and years, every night on election night, you bite your nails, right? Because as a Republican, you're pushing a big rock up a hill in Pennsylvania every election cycle.
We're nearing the top of the hour. Our first chance to make projections when voting ends in 6 states. That means the first votes in the critical Georgia Senate race are coming soon, all after the break.
We are just minutes away now from the first major round of poll closings on this election night in America, with huge consequences for the nation. At 7 p.m. Eastern, polling places close in Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vermont, and Virginia. And we will get our first hints at how the battle for control of Congress may unfold in the hours ahead. Both parties battling for the 218 seats needed to win the majority in the House of Representatives. A total of 65 House seats are on the line in states where polls are closing at the top of the hour. 9 of them are considered competitive, including 4 in Florida, where voting is about to end in most districts across the state, though not all. In the fight for the Senate, the Georgia race could be a decider. Incumbent Democrat and pastor Raphael Warnock faces Republican former football star Herschel Walker. Walker has held on to the support of top Republicans despite multiple controversies. Warnock is aiming to repeat his special election win 2 years ago that was key to flipping the Senate to Democratic control. To the governors now. We're watching an epic rematch in Georgia. Democrat Stacey Abrams challenging Republican Governor Brian Kemp, who narrowly beat her 4 years ago. We're very close to our first chance to make projections. Right now, let's check in with our correspondents in Georgia. First to Eva McKend at the headquarters of Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock. And Eva, as we wait the first results from Georgia, what are you hearing from the Warnock campaign headquarters?
Well, Jake, they're feeling confident. They are saying that, really they did all that they could. They campaigned everywhere. Senator Warnock, they say, has spent his 2 years thinking about all Georgians in suburban areas, in rural areas, in metro centers. And they say it is because he has run this type of campaign as a bridge builder, he thinks he can win here. Still, though, Senator Warnock dealing with a really aggressive challenge from the former NFL star Herschel Walker. The Warnock campaign says that is something that they always anticipated in a state like this one, that the race would always be close. But still, you can tell in the last few weeks the momentum sort of shift on the ground with conservatives consolidating around Herschel Walker. Still a lot of confidence here from Senator Warnock's team, thinking that they can potentially avoid a runoff, but that is a real possibility. If neither Warnock or Walker get above 50%, that is going to extend this race into overtime and lead to a potential runoff on December the 6th, Jake.
All right, Eva, let's go to Herschel Walker's campaign headquarters, where Jeff Zeleny is standing by. And Jeff, how does the Walker campaign headquarters, how do they think that the many controversies about Herschel Walker, especially about his personal life, how do they think that played a role, especially in the closing days of that campaign, if at all?
Well, Jake, it definitely did. And you'll think back just to several weeks and even months ago when Republicans here in Georgia and in Washington were just in a state of panic about the allegations that were indeed coming out about Herschel Walker. But then Republicans did one thing. They circled the wagons around him. They dispatched many senators who were campaigning at his side, and they effectively took a page from the Trump playbook. And they did not apologize, and they pushed forward. It was a page from the Trump playbook without the former president himself. In the final days of this race, as Donald Trump campaigned across the country, traveling from state to state to state, he did not come to Georgia. And that was by design, I'm told. I'm told that the former president was in frequent conversation with Herschel Walker. Of course, he's the one who recruited him to run in this Georgia Senate race in the first place, over the objection of many Washington Republicans, including Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell. But it was former President Donald Trump who urged Herschel Walker to run, and I am told that they have spoken all the time on the telephone. Last evening they spoke a few times, I'm told. Today they also spoke. So very interesting, taking a page out of that playbook but leaving him out of this. So that allowed the Walker campaign to do one thing, to make this race about President Biden and to tie Senator Raphael Warnock to President Biden. Jake, I'm just struck here, either driving down the freeways, watching television, looking at mailers that voters received. There was a side-by-side picture of Senator Warnock and President Biden everywhere you went, effectively trying to tie the two together. What that allowed them not to do was to link Herschel Walker with Donald Trump. So as the votes are counted here at the top of the hour, the polls will close across the state of Georgia, with the exception of a few polls that are staying open a bit longer because of some minor complications. It'll be fascinating to see which strategy actually worked. But one thing is clear, that Herschel Walker was not disqualified as this campaign came to a close. Jake?
All right, Jeff Zeleny at Herschel Walker's campaign headquarters in Atlanta. David Chalian now has some early exit poll data from Georgia. David, what are you looking at?
Yeah, along these lines, Jake, we're taking a look about sort of what was on Georgia voters' minds in this election when it comes to the qualities they were looking for in their candidates. And I think it's pretty clear it's sort of a character election that is taking place there. 36% of Georgia voters are looking for a candidate who shares their values. 32% looking for a candidate that has honesty and integrity. Less so about empathy and experience. 19% say, I'm looking for someone who cares about people like me. And only 8% are looking for the candidate with the right experience, which may be good news for Herschel Walker since he is new to politics. Who shows good judgment? We asked that of Georgia voters. 46% say only Warnock shows good judgment. Far fewer say only Herschel Walker. 28% shows good judgment. Both 5%, 18% of voters in this Georgia election say neither candidate shows good judgment. Are Warnock's views too extreme? And this has been something that Walker has been hammering away at on the campaign trail. Look at this. The voters in Georgia are evenly split on this. 48% of Georgia voters say yes, Warnock's views are too extreme. 47% say no. Herschel Walker scores a bit better on this front. Are Herschel Walker's views too extreme? Well, 43% of Georgia voters say yes, but a slim majority, 52%, Dana, say Herschel Walker's views are not too extreme for them.
So interesting. David, thank you so much. And let's talk about the Georgia Senate race and some of the exit polls that David was just talking about. Specifically, one of the things that really stuck out to me was which candidate shows good judgment. Only 28% say Walker, Warnock 46%. Maybe given everything that we've seen about the allegations about Herschel Walker, not that surprising. But even given this, it's not expected to be the determining factor as to whether or not Herschel Walker will win or lose.
Not at all. I mean, Herschel Walker's unfavorables and the image that voters have of him are pretty negative, especially after all of this. But this is just an environment in which Republicans are more likely to do well. The environment favors Republicans. But as we were saying earlier in the show, when you have a state like Georgia that is already purple to begin with, and then on top of that, you have an environment that is favorable, and on top of that, you have a top of the ticket race that where the Republican might be doing way better than Herschel Walker, no matter the outcome, that I think is a recipe for Walker to get a little bit of a pass, surviving perhaps in this.
I mean, it is amazing that he's getting any kind of a pass at all. I mean, these allegations that a pro-life candidate paid for 2 women to have abortions, that he fathered a number of children that he didn't support, that he threatened his wife, that he had mental illness. I mean, these would sink any other candidate. Herschel Walker's got 2 things going for him. One, he is an idol in the state of Georgia. He's a Heisman Trophy winner from the University of Georgia. And by the way, Georgia is the #1 team in the nation. They just crushed Tennessee on Saturday. And 2, to a certain degree, it's all about teams. And the fact is that I think a lot of people may hold their nose about Herschel Walker, but they'd rather see
Chris,
Mitch McConnell, let me just finish, as Mitch McConnell as a Senate Majority Leader than Chuck Schumer.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I agree about your second point about teams. This is all about teams. Maybe not so much about the first, that only somebody like Herschel Walker could survive this, because Herschel Walker, yes, I agree, he's a very famous person, and that's part of it. But he is following the Donald Trump playbook on how to deal with the scandal to a T, trying to use it to his in his favor, and to say, look what they're doing to me.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I think that says a lot about where we are as a country. I do think, not to bring Trump into this, but he has a lot to do with this. He changed the way voters interpret scandals and whether or not they should matter to them. I mean, you may not like it, but that is the reality that we are seeing in Georgia.
Wouldn't even have been the nominee, wouldn't have gotten the Trump endorsement if he weren't a celebrity. His whole campaign is about celebrity, and he is an icon in the state of Georgia.
Speaking of actually pretty new icons, the governor, Governor Kemp, this has been one of the most fascinating dynamics to watch, because the last time he won, it was a very, very tight race.
50,000 votes.
Between he and Stacey Abrams. It is a rematch. And he is just seen in such a different light because of Donald Trump, because he positioned himself sort of as a barricade between Donald Trump and the actual votes that happened. Plus, people are kind of okay with his stewardship as governor.
Yeah, I think it's more the second than the first. I think that people generally feel that he opened up the state, he didn't stay in lockdown as long, and that Georgia didn't have a big spike in COVID. And in fact, the economy wasn't as hit as hard as a lot of other states were.
I think the question a lot of people had been coming into tonight asking is, what are we going to see in terms of splitting tickets? Are we going to see people skipping one race and voting in another? That's a huge question tonight, but it's particularly important for for Herschel Walker and whether or not he can actually get to a 50% mark to avoid a runoff. If he can't, then we're just doing it all over again, and then the dynamics totally change. So I think both campaigns at this moment, they believe this race is just as tight as can be, and both sides are just trying to keep it alive a little bit longer.
We should just introduce America to the name Chase Oliver. He's a libertarian, a former Democrat, and he could be the person who keeps either of these guys from getting to 50%, and then you can blame him when we keep following the Warnock race against Walker until December 6th.
Jake and John, let's go over to you at the wall.
Thanks so much, Dana. And right now we have votes coming in. It's exciting. Votes are actually coming in. What are we seeing, John?
Well, we're seeing, number one, a lesson early in the night. Look at a vote. If you're a Democrat or Republican, cheer your party on, but be careful as you look. I say that because of this. These are the two Senate races on the map where we have votes so far. And in Kentucky, at the moment, the Democratic candidate, Charles Booker, is 4,881 votes ahead of the Republican incumbent, Rand Paul. We will watch this throughout the night. Sometimes we do get surprised, but Mr. Booker is not expected to beat the Republican incumbent. The reason he's ahead is that the early votes are coming in from Jefferson County, which is Louisville, which is the #1 county, the biggest most populous county in the state.
He is expected to win that county, and right? I mean,
correct, yes. That is a Democratic county. That is the most Democratic county in the state. So you get the early votes, and we're going to see this throughout the night in other states as well. Some of that's in, Democratic county reporting first here. Some places it'll be mail votes first or election day votes first. But we'll just watch it. We'll just watch it. And then you have up here just the Indiana Republican Senator Todd Young out to a very early lead. It's 4% of the vote, but he is heavily favored in this race. And it's not that these races don't matter, because one of the things you're looking for if you're in the Democrat or the Republican headquarters is, are there any surprises? Are you going to get any disruptions in the force, if you will? And so if you're in a 50-50 Senate, you're just trying to make sure you keep your own if you're the Republicans. Both of these races at the end of the night, we anticipate will be that way, but we'll keep an eye when you see votes come in like this. You always watch and see. And so what happens at the top of the hour is when things get interesting. If you're a partisan watching at home, this is when it starts to get more tense.
The actual competitive race.
Right. We start to get actual votes in the Senate race here. Herschel Walker, Raphael Warnock. So what are you looking at here? Number one, we'll watch how the votes come in and how they're counted. Georgia tends to count pretty quickly. They do a very good job, as we learned in 2020. This, obviously, Fulton County is the most important place in the state in terms of population. Biggest 10% of the vote, the biggest county out of 159 counties in the state of Georgia. It's one of the most complicated, fun for me states. I know it's not fun for partisans at home as you go through it. And then the issue is, we'll go back in time here. I just want to go back to look when Brian Kemp won in 2018. This is the governor's race. We're talking about the Senate race, but it's the same math here. It's the suburbs around Atlanta. And it's not so much we expect those to be blue again like they were in the Kemp race here. We expect them to be blue in the Senate race. The question is the margins.
Margins, exactly.
Margins. And we're going to be talking about margins for days. So let's come back to the Senate map and get this one take this out of the way and close this out. Come back to 2022. What else are you looking for? Dana and Chris and Abby were just talking about Herschel Walker. How do Republicans view Herschel Walker? If you go back to the 2020 presidential race, Donald Trump lost. Donald Trump lost Georgia by 11,000 votes, but look at all this red. This is a test for Herschel Walker in Georgia tonight. The polls close in a few minutes. It's a test for Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania. The polls close in the next hour. Can they run it up? Do Trump voters who like that particular style of Republican, do they turn out? Do they turn out in decent high numbers? They're small counties, right? You go into some of these counties, and they're tiny in terms of the population, right? 2,400 votes, but 73%. That matters, right? Margins again.
When you only win, just to remind people, Joe Biden won Georgia by 11,779 votes. So if that's our template, all night we're going to be looking at, is Raphael Warnock matching what Biden did?
Correct.
Is Herschel Walker exceeding what Trump did? That's what we're going to be looking at.
Yes, and most of that will be around the Atlanta suburbs. So if Herschel Walker can overperform Trump in the Atlanta suburbs and then break even with Trump, right, in the rural areas. So do Trump voters view him as legitimate, one of them, and they turn out? And do suburban voters who were, frankly, repulsed by Donald Trump in much of the country say, we want a Republican in the Senate, we think Herschel Walker is good enough for us? It'll be a key in the governor's race and key in the Senate race as well as you pull it in. That's where it starts to get real. Let's come back to 2022 when we start to fill in the votes here. And we also then at the bottom of the hour, 7:30, you get North Carolina, which is one of those, if Democrats are going to have a surprise tonight, and an extra piece, if you will, in the chess game that's going to become the Senate, the Sherry Beasley race in North Carolina. I have to come to the Senate for that. It's one of our competitive races. They are hoping. Oops, one up there. Come on down. There we go. Former state Supreme Court justice running against a member of the House Republican Conference. She's run a remarkably competitive race.
Right.
And if it ends up being 52-48 or 51-49 in favor of the Republican, Democrats are going to be saying we should have spent more money.
Oh, I've already heard Democrats say that they should have sent more money to Cheri Beasley.
Incredibly tough climate. No national Democrat. They have a Democratic governor. Obama won in 2008, historic African-American turnout. That will be critical for Cheri Beasley tonight. Can you do that in a midterm election year? We'll start learning that 7:30 in the hour. But the top of the hour, Georgia is the big one for us. And I just want to walk over to the House map if we can sneak in here just as we come. Because what happens here is this, in the House races, these are the ones that are in so far. 11 races coming in so far, 10 Republicans leading, 1 Democrat leading. These are not viewed as competitive races, but again, if you're in the party headquarters, you got to keep what you expect to keep. So the map filling in right now as expected. The challenge is, as we get into the next hour, here we bring up these competitive races. Virginia closes at the top of the hour. Just in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we have, and I'll bring it up for you right here, you have these Democratic incumbents. In the Northern Virginia suburbs, it's Jennifer Wexton. Just beneath her, as you move more into the central part of the state, but still suburban, Abigail Spanberger. And then you come down here, considered the most vulnerable of these three, Elaine Luria. She's on the January 6th committee. What happens in Virginia as we start to count those House races? Can Democrats keep all 3? Do they lose 1? Do they lose 2? That's going to tell us a lot, Jake, about Republicans need a net gain of 5. Polls close in Virginia. That is a big early clue.